That might be. We good to go? Yeah. All right. Very April 12th, 2023 meeting of the Albany County Planning and Zoning Commission rather. So roll call, Annie here, Platt here, Vernon here, and David is absent at this moment. Hinkley is here. Comment on the agenda, additions, corrections. We have one addition request by the County Attorney's Office. Is that still the case?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Record reflect the arrival of the baby. Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the moratorium on subdivision permit applications and zoning district amendment applications, which was established by the county commissioners upon planning and zoning's recommendation, is set to expire on April 19th. In order for that moratorium to continue, there would need to be a recommendation from this commission for its continuation. So I have some proposed a draft of the resolution which the Board of County Commissioners would pass, which I can send out to everyone once this agenda item is added.
And is it appropriate to add that agenda item having not been noticed? Is that an issue?
Because this is a regular meeting, that is not an issue.
Is there a motion to add discussion of extended moratorium?
Sure, we add that moratorium to our agenda.
Is there a second? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Done. Let's call it, I think it's 7.5. We'll put it down with cap update. Susan?
Certainly.
Okay. Other comments on the agenda, additions, corrections, rearrangements? Seeing that, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the agenda as recommended.
As recommended for amendment. Okay.
I'll second Mr. Chair.
All right, seconded. Further discussion. Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We have the agenda. The minutes are the next item for the March 15th regular meeting. Corrections, comments, amendments.
I have one correction.
Yes, ma'am.
On page 6, item A5, Commissioner's Platts name is misspelled. It's spelled with 1 2 instead of 2.
Okay. What was that? Sorry. You follow that? Okay, no.
Page 6,
Yep.
item A5, Commissioner Platts name is misspelled.
Okay, yep, got it.
Yep, got it.
Thank you. In the past, there's been a request to note how people voted. I noticed you, for example, on the 60 last, you didn't put that in. I guess that would be appropriate. Was there some reason that you were or were not putting the names down? No. Okay. Does that sound reasonable, folks? That the record reflects who did what?
Given that you can watch everything on YouTube now.
Well,
There's absolutely no reason.
yeah, no, to some extent, the minutes become a kind of table of contents for the discussion, but I like a little more narrative rather than fishing around in a YouTube, which sometimes
Yes,
goes
no.
straight, to be fair. So
No, I'm saying that given that it's public knowledge already,
yes,
there's no reason not to put it in that.
sure, sure.
No such thing as anonymity.
And we do, the rule is we do the public's business in public, so we should be stand by our votes. Okay, fair enough. I don't have a specific amendment, but that would be easy. We just put the names to, I think that was our only explicit vote.
No.
No,
To release the growth plan to public comment was also according to the minutes.
okay, yes, that's true, yeah. Okay, so is that a tractable amendment to put her, just go through and put those things down, okay. Other thoughts on the March 15 minutes? Motion to approve as amended,
I will move that we approve that as amended.
or second discussion of that motion. Hearing seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Fair enough, disclosures, conflicts of interest, planning,
None.
flat, none. Good burden,
None.
good David.
Our correspondence about the cap. From Steve.
Well, all right, fair question, and the way that we've considered this in the past, there's why I've called it disclosures, conflict of interest. The first would be if you've learned something that you know and the rest of us don't know, if it's relevant to one of our agenda items, then the point of this would be to share that with us.
Yeah. So in that case.
And then the conflict of interest, of course, if there's something on our agenda that will increase the value of your home to your benefit, that's the kind of thing that we want to do. So those of you who live within the APOZ have a slightly different relationship to what we're doing here than those who don't. So
So
that
I
would
would say.
be you are you in or you out?
Are you in? I am. I'm in.
You are, yeah, so you are certainly. Okay, so. It's been David, Porter, you live within the gas protection area, whatever that's. Okay. And I have nothing special to offer in that thing. All right, we have one application before us, a rerun on last month. Let me remind ourselves of the procedure, which is to get a report from staff. And questions and answers from the commission, followed by comments from the applicant. In that same vein, then we'll open it formally to public comments. It's the public hearing under the statutes. If you are making a public comment, please state your name and address. Try to confine yourself to 3 minutes or so and stay on topic. There is opportunity for general comments to the commission on other matters at the end. We'll then close the public hearing, have a meeting, discussion amongst ourselves and decide on the disposition of the application. So the one application before us is 60 Last Zoning District Amendment, CEA 0123, from the March meeting where a motion to approve failed on a tie vote. Followed by a motion to table. Here we are. What says staff?
We need a motion to untable.
First, okay, let us, so.
Chairman, I disagree on table.
Item, is there a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, is there discussion of the untabling? Hearing seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, done. Perfect, go, thanks.
All right, so as you all know, this was on the March meeting. It was tabled for a tie vote and then, or it had a motion and that failed because of the tie vote and then it was tabled. I guess nothing really has changed. I know there was talk whether the applicant would want to separate the applications out. That didn't happen. We also didn't get any more public comment. I can go through the application again if you want me to, but I don't.
My question was gonna be, has anything changed?
Nothing has
in that
changed.
Staff report, maps, and no public comments, and so we are precisely where we left this last night.
Correct.
Thank you.
May I add that I have watched video. The YouTube. So.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions, I guess, since you were the only one not here?
I have a few comments.
Okay.
And we will have an opportunity to hear from the applicant who is here today. there was a note in the kind of cover paragraph that suggested that there was an impact from the new zoning resolution. That was written by you, Mr. Birch.
Yeah, right.
What, tell me about that, just remind me, what's different about this one than it would have been had we not changed our zoning resolution?
So previously, we could not consider the comprehensive plan, which kind of allowed you guys to take into account the impacts of the future land use. However, since we changed that, the zoning district amendment, now we can take into account the comprehensive plan, and it removes the ability to look at future land use.
Okay, that's where I kind of stumble. I don't think we ever had explicit authority to look at future land use, and that's the point of some discussion, as opposed to just the zoning change as it stands, Mr. Ayers.
Thank you. As a response to, the 2021 case, Asphalt Specialties, versus Laramie County Commissioners, it was ruled, that a comprehensive plan cannot be the basis for, denying or, I guess, restricting, a land use which is otherwise permissible, under the zoning regulations, which is, the more general statement that a land use plan, does not arise to the same level as regulation. And with those amendments, in 98301, it states that, without having that statute in front of me, that a comprehensive plan cannot alone be the basis of a decision for a specific land use or development. So part of that, in order to continue to use the comprehensive plan in what was formerly zoning changes, now are termed zoning district amendments, this commission cannot look at, I guess, the exact contemplated future land use, because within a zoning district, there are multiple land uses, which could be either allowed as of right or conditionally allowed. So the focus needs to be on the entirety of the land uses which would be allowed, because this is not a application for the specific land use or development. So if you're looking at specific land uses or specific developments, which an applicant is contemplating or planning to do, then that risks running afoul of that 98301 provision, that comprehensive plans cannot be used as a regulatory tool for specific land uses.
So let me understand it. The growth plan should be ignored when we discuss this case.
No, the comprehensive plan should be used in its general recommendation of what sort of zoning districts, what sort of land uses should be allowed within a certain area of the county. But it's looking at the zoning district as a whole within that designation. If you look at land use table 4.1, even within small lot residential, you can get a conditional use permit for an animal shelter / kennel. So it's not the permitting of a specific land use that's being considered for the zoning district amendment. You're looking at all the attendant possibilities that could come along with the zoning district amendment, not whatever specific land use or development an applicant may or may not desire in accomplishing that. Because if they change to commercial, they may want a tree farm that's allowed as of right, probably not very offensive to neighbors, but also allowed as of right in commercial is automobile wrecker service. A little more offensive to residential neighbors. So just as way of example, if we can keep our focus on the zoning designation as a whole, not necessarily what someone wants to be doing as a result of that. That is how we can permissibly use the comprehensive plan in making our zoning determinations.
The part of that I was choked on was that something had changed by virtue of our zoning district amendments. It strikes me that what you just described has always been true. If somebody has come to us with I want to change from agricultural to rural residential, for example, so that I can split a 40-acre lot into two pieces. We're being asked to approve the change to rural residential, which allows 5-acre lots. And it would be inappropriate for us to say, oh, this person's only planning on doing 20s, therefore let's give them the rural residential zoning. This was a point that we argued some years ago before we changed our zoning at all. And it was a point that I felt quite strongly about, that, hey folks, even though this applicant has said that's what they have in mind, forget that. This is what you're allowing, is this full envelope of uses. But that's always been the case, has it not? What did we change by virtue of our amendment? That's what I'm concerned about.
Now we're only using comprehensive plan in a way we weren't able before.
Right, we've expanded our view, we have not shrunk it, we have not denied ourselves the ability to. I don't think it was never appropriate for us to make a zoning change based on a proposed specific use. And we didn't change that by virtue of our zoning district amendments, did we?
We did not, Mr. Hirsch.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I mean, I think what you're saying is factually correct. I don't think that we changed anything in what we have in our zoning district amendment that would affect that. What has changed is there's different members on this board that are looking for different things than previous members. I mean, there were times when we had a zoning amendment before us, but planning and zoning commission at the time, none of you wanted to know, what are you going to do with the property? So I think as a policy, people told you guys, or this, not you, but like planning and zoning commission, what it is that we're doing. But like, to get back to your point, is there anything changed in the language? No. How we've been presenting these will change because of discussions with the attorney's office, what you guys want to see. But ultimately, yeah, anytime we've done a zoning change, we need to look at the whole use table, everything in there. Just because somebody says they're going to do something didn't mean that was what was going to happen. However, previous planning and zoning commission wanted that information. So just that's kind of the background around this, but nothing has really changed. You're correct.
Okay, that's nothing changed that in asphalt specialties, which I think we got rid of in our hospitals. They had no zoning. It's the problem there, and they were using our comprehensive plan as though it were zoning. And if I'm understanding the ruling correctly, they said you can't do that. And then that was subsequently codified in state law. That's what they did.
So is it allowable to change the zoning for one or two parcels out of a whole zone? I mean, because that's what we're looking at, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who are living there on small lot residential, would like to keep it that way. And then in the midst of them, we have a proposal to change a parcel that can be divided or whatever, right? Into something else that will not be the same as the rest of their area.
So, zoning districts are not contiguous. They don't fit squarely, all industrial is here, all rural residential is here. There's kind of a smattering, a little bit of a checkerboard effect. You do want to avoid spot zoning. which,
Exactly, I didn't know the word, but that's
Yeah.
exactly what I'm asking. Are we, in this case, looking at spot zoning within a wider neighborhood?
I would argue probably not, just given the nature of this particular neighborhood where it has commercial uses next to industrial, next to residential. It's already a bit of a smart, kind of a smattering throughout. Spot zoning really only comes where it's like you have a very squarely residential area and you just put industrial use right in the center. That just kind of cries foul that there was some sort of special undue permission given to someone.
Right.
And I suppose, Mr. Chair, back to your question, I think that the way the zoning district amendment process was previously structured, it did look too heavily into that exact use that was being contemplated, which kind of shoehorned a violation, just due to its very nature. So it has changed in that sense.
Okay, thank you. And perhaps we get Mr. Birch to address this question. What do you, spot zoning is not illegal, it's core form.
Spot zoning is unconstitutional.
Well, it is defined as what exactly spot zoning is. That's why I guess I'm looking to our planning director, perhaps she look at this from a planning perspective, what is considered spot zoning?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, basically what Matt described is spot zoning. Spot zoning usually is a small lot within a larger area that's already zoned for a certain use. I don't know the exact definition, but the ones that I've reviewed, emphasize that it's like this small area, like, an acre parcel within, 40 acres of residential that they want to do, industrial use, that would definitely be spot zoning. There are definitions out there. I mean, if that's something that we could provide for you guys, if that would help, we could pass those on. But yeah, I mean, I think the basis is like, if it's you're proposing a zoning that can allow a bunch of uses that just probably aren't appropriate within everything else, because everything else is the same and this would be different. And that's what I'd say spot zoning is, but
Empirically, and I go back to the one that founded Wild Horse branches that got our attention a couple of years ago. Agricultural one end to the other, basically, and the gentleman came in wanting to build a second home on an agricultural lot and applied to have to. So rezone rural residential. Struck this commissioner as spot zoning, it did not strike the planning office nor the rest of the commission that way. Did that, so I guess my point is just that this somewhat squishy concept of what's spot zoning, what's not. Turning to the one at hand, 60 last. I think the map showed it, but to share with us your sense of the context of this zoning change with respect to its neighbors.
well, one of the neighbors is a greenhouse, which is a commercial property. And then across the street, to the west, I believe, is industrial properties. I don't know if it's Mount Cement or one of those other ones that are across the street there.
And a railroad.
And a railroad. And yeah, and honestly, the property has been zoned. I mean, our position is it's been zoned rural residential because of the 1997 assessor's information we have. But has it been used as a commercial property? Yeah, it has. I mean, does it look like a commercial property? Yes, it does. So, so in that context, I mean, we feel like it's not spot zoning. We feel like because it's next to a commercial zone. Again, the area is spotted with commercial, residential, and industrial. There's no block of zoning that it is. I know that a lot of these areas in our comp plan, in the comp plan of the city, I mean, a lot of this area, and maybe not this specific property or these, but I think the direction is to go commercial in these areas or industrial, just because of in the area that it's in, but obviously there's lots of residential down there too, so. So yeah, I mean, we feel comfortable with the recommendation of approval of the zoning change. I mean, we have other reservations about other things that don't really apply to this zoning change, but yeah, I don't know if Matt or Joe has anything else to add, but we reviewed the regulations, the comp plan, and we feel like it fits the context of those documents.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, so my question relates more broadly to the proposal we're entertaining right now about growth area. And in the mapping for the growth area, that area is designated as residential, probably because of zoning. Okay, we go ahead this year, we approve this one. Next year, something comes up in another part of the county of the growth area, and we approve that, and then we go. So are we shooting ourselves in the foot by injecting different zoning decisions into what's supposed to be a nice, big, comprehensive plan?
So
I'm not talking about this specific one, but I'm as a rule of thumb for us going forward next couple of years. Do we need to make a decision that, you know, because if we make these changes all the time, all our cost estimates, all our water line estimates, our sewage points, all of these will have to change, and then we'll have to change every single time we make a zoning decision. So my question for the commission and the staff is, are we going to, you know, have a plan and then shoot ourselves in the foot here and there?
So if we're talking about the Laramie area growth plan that we're working on currently has not been adopted, so we can't use that as any type of direction in what we're doing today.
That is clear.
Okay,
I'm just saying, moving forward, should we adopt some decision regarding that? Because today may not be relevant, but tomorrow might.
right. And today we have to look at what we have on the books, you know.
I understand.
But are we gonna shoot ourselves in the foot? It is what it is. I mean, the property is not going to change much in look. The uses could change because it hasn't been really used in quite a while for anything. Will it affect infrastructure and those types of things? The property art is hooked into the water and sewer district down there, so that's already available.
That was.
Okay, well, I'm not understanding your question.
Well, it's also the case right now that the growth plan, as far as zoning, is very conceptual. It's not property specific, that's coming. So right now, it doesn't really apply.
I understand that. My question is more philosophical. Okay. Should we as a commission change constantly the zoning as haphazardly as it comes, given that we are working on a comprehensive plan? But I understand the mark.
Well, we have the plan, that's gonna sort of dictate things.
Yeah, perhaps I could respond to that in a couple of ways. And then we'll get to this in our training next week. Where did we come here? The current, the zoning is all parcel by parcel. And anybody can come to us at any time and say, I don't like how I'm zoned, I want you to change that. And that's an appropriate application. And then we consider the implications of that in any ways that we feel are appropriate. There is a comprehensive plan for Albany County. It was not used to determine the current zoning designations of anything we're talking about. They are all based on their tax status at a certain time. Like that. So that I don't mean to trivialize that. It was basically a philosophical statement that we like things the way they are right now in 1997. Whatever that date was. So since then, it's all been piecemeal. Now, in the case of growth plan, that's the first time that we are bringing a comprehensive like plan to bear on this decision. with respect to the growth plan, my understanding of it, and again, it's not been formally adopted, but it is relevant in its presentation of data. It stops at Huron streets. Right? So it stops just north of this. So we do not have a growth plan in the works that would address this particular property. However, immediately north of this, that growth plan recommends industrial. Everything between railroad to it. So as far as kind of where that fits into our general mental picture, those consultants have gone along with what we've heard here, that is a premier mixed use commercial industrial use. So to answer your philosophical question, that's up to the individual members of the board how faithful they want to be to some larger vision. Other questions, comments on that, and we'll get back to us in a moment. There's other questions for staff, and then we'll hear from the applicant, but I'm sure we'll have
I have questions for that.
please.
I think these are all for that. And various parties, we've heard, property owner, neighbor, one representative neighbor, potential lesser than or a record company. Depending on your personal views, they all can present as sympathetic figures, but is there anything in state statute that allows us to consider sympathies in making our decisions?
Bear with me, please, Mr. Platt. So zoning changes, zoning district amendments are not addressed at all by state statute. I would think that every single county in Wyoming which has zoning has a mechanism for it. And I'd say that to the extent that any sort of sympathies or equity can play into the required findings for a zoning district amendment, as have been codified in our zoning resolution, then yeah, that would be a proper way to do that. Really, the decision itself, it has to be tied to those required findings. Any sort of ancillary information, Walper helpful to have an understanding of a situation. It's not necessarily the operative fact. Really, we're just looking at that. Is it consistent with the suggestions of the Albany County Comprehensive Plan, particularly the long-range growth plan and priority growth areas? Is it compatible with surrounding properties? Are there consistent patterns of development? Would there be adverse economic impacts, adverse natural environmental resources? So I don't believe that. I guess sympathies would.
What if you just like someone better than the other?
So that, yeah, the central role of a governmental body is to be fair and impartial.
If someone new comes in, your property owner comes into an established area, such as this property, can they plant trees if they want to? Even if the neighbors don't want them to plant trees?
Yes.
Could they paint their buildings in a different manner, even though it might be garish in the eyes of their neighbors?
For our perspective, yes,
Could they build a fence that might exclude deer from crossing their property, even though the neighbors like to see deer?
so long as there's no regulation. preventing them from doing so.
Is there any legal principle that deference to be given in these sort of disputed matters between neighbors that people in there first have primacy over what happens over some property that doesn't belong to them?
The short answer would be no. Not for our purposes.
Yeah, those are my questions. Thank you.
Just to comment on that, we do have a list of specific items that need to be considered. And those don't have sharp edges compatibility with the surroundings, that's in the eye of the beholder. So certainly.
I was interested what Matt would, the guidance in here on those things. Those are all my questions.
And then
For staff.
correct me if I'm wrong, but the general authority under which we zone is that which is delegated to county commissions to look after the health, welfare, and morals of the county. It's that broad, right? Thank you. Okay, other questions for staff?
Not for you, though. But I don't know, it's up to Dave and Joe who feels, they're sort of general questions, I guess. Is the Windmill property that pre-existed zoning, but was zoned commercial when zoning was done? Do you consider that a pre-existing non-conforming use, or is that title not apply?
Chair. It was zoned in 2015 commercial, so there's no non-conformity. It's a commercial property operating as an allowed use.
Okay. All right, that takes care of that question. The only other question I have is regarding the use of city water in the staff report. In the paragraph about the comprehensive plan, you know, it mentions that there are fire flow limitations or agreements with the city regarding water use. And that primarily residential uses are envisioned in the associated priority growth area 2 locations. So I guess my question is regarding subsection G, paragraph 3, little d, the natural environmental resource impacts. Because you don't consider the water a utility. It's considered a natural resource. And so I'm just wondering, was it the city's intention to see more commercial use get put on to this high quality water that the city's pumping out that was presumably for residential uses? Do you know of anything in the city agreement with the South Laramie water? I don't want to call it water and sewer district because there is no sewer, but do you know of any limitations? I mean, the city didn't comment on this.
I don't know the specifics on the agreement between South Laramie Sewer District and the city of Laramie. I know that there probably are businesses that wouldn't be compatible with the system. But do you know what were the comments from South Laramie Water Sewer District?
They just wanted to know their future plans and then talked about the separate water connections.
So if they had, if they had to connect again into make another connection, they would have to go through the South Laramie Water Sewer District. And they would be the ones that would review their contract with the city and determine.
I guess that's anything else. I guess it's just philosophically, when I think of the zoning changes that we've made in this area, in the time that I've served on the commission, it seems like we're of two minds. One of the other commercial approvals going from small lot residential to commercial was so they could put in a multi-family dwelling. So on the one hand, we're upping the housing out here. But on the other hand, we're willing to put in more commercial and make more incompatibilities in my mind. So I sort of struggle with that. That if you were just, and also I guess the other thing I struggle with is we look at lot one and we see that it had commercial uses, but it wasn't supposed to be having commercial. They weren't supposed to be burying salvaged construction material on the yard, and so that really shouldn't be factoring into our decision. I mean, because somebody misused the land, just like Michael's questions about sympathetic figures, I mean, it may be a fact that the land was used improperly and now it looks commercial, but it shouldn't have been that way. And so that seems like information we shouldn't be factoring in, because it's almost giving permission to a past illegal use. And so I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, I don't know when the use started, if it was started before 1997, before we had zoning and they just assessed it wrong. I don't know if it was after that they began the use and there was no enforcement. I you know, a lot of that history, I don't know of that property. But those are good points, just because they're doing something that's, if it was illegal and they weren't supposed to be doing it, that doesn't mean that, yeah. So I agree with your point there, so.
Thanks. I don't get any questions.
Let me interject here. I was corrected by Mr. Platt. I made a mistake earlier. The Huron Street is the southernmost part of the city in that area. There's that big chunk of it that sits down. So I was looking at the wrong map. In fact, the growth area management plan that is under consideration has mixed use in that area. Again, we see just exactly where it falls in neighborhood, commercial, and estate residential. So
That's what I thought I said.
let me correct my earlier statement. I went to use of the map. Okay. Other comments, questions, we'll come back to this amongst ourselves for these guys. After that, let's turn to the applicants. Would you like to?
May I?
On behalf of the applicant?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
So my name is Jaron Scoville. I'm Mr. Herman's real estate agent. I'm the one that worked with him on the purchase of this property and numerous other properties in town, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you guys this evening. Basically, just wanted to kind of give you guys the impression of what we as real estate professionals in Laramie and the surrounding area look at when we're looking at a property for a client for either sale or purchase. Historically, we have always used the Albany County Assessor's designation of the property's zoning when we put out a listing. Until this particular, incident came forth. I've been a real estate agent for 13 years in this town. I had no idea that there was a separate zoning map outside of what shows on the county assessor's basic information. I've spoken to numerous other real estate agents in this town, and it's news to all of us, honestly. So when this property was listed for sale, it was listed as a commercially zoned property. When I showed it to Mr. Herman, we looked at it from the perspective of this is a commercial property. It's next door to another commercial property. It just made sense. And, when you look at the appearance of it, it certainly appears to be a commercial property. So Mr. Herman's application here isn't really because he's wanting to change the use of the property. He's wanting to use it for the purposes that he thought he bought it for. And so I understand that the zoning was redone, the map was done in 2015. Again, I'd been a real estate agent for several years at that point. It wasn't something that ever came to any of our attention at that point. I have no idea what the zoning on this property was prior to 2015. I haven't been able to find that information anywhere. I do know I moved here in 1992. The property was previously occupied by Ortega Construction. in 1992, when I came here to go to college, Ortega Construction was a big, busy construction company back then. So I can't say that I personally know that this was being used commercially in 92, but I would say it's a pretty solid, reasonable assumption that it was. As far as the, mixed use and spot zoning that's been being discussed and things like that, again, as a resident of Laramie, it's important to me that things are zoned in a way that makes sense. I live in the middle of a residential neighborhood. I don't want industrial use popping up next door to my house. But at the same time, I think it's easy to look at this area and recognize that this is a land parcel that has been used commercial for many, many decades at this point. It is next door to another commercial property. It's surrounded by numerous other commercial properties. There's a trucking company a little ways to the south. There's, the wrecking yard to the north. There's a massive industrial complex right across the street. The railroad, of course, is right there. There's a lot of mixed use. I just don't see that it is a blight on the neighborhood to allow what has been used as commercial for as long as probably any of us can remember to continue to be used as commercial. I will say I've worked with Mr. Herman here for over a decade at this point. I've helped him purchase many, many properties in this town. And I have yet to see him do anything but improve anything he buys. He likes to buy blighted properties and make improvements to them. He's bought numerous, residential properties that were falling apart and has cleaned them up and done some really nice things with them. He's bought commercial properties that have been, kind of eyesores and not great places, and he's done very nice things to those. My office is located in a building that he owns. That was in pretty rough shape when he bought it. It's a pretty nice place now. Right down on First Street. I don't know if you guys know, I'm home in Laramie Real Estate has been my company for the past several years. I actually just recently sold it to my associate broker. I'm now the associate broker. But I've been with Home and Laramie Real Estate since its inception. I was with Ike Real Estate prior to that. So I've been in the real estate industry in this town for a very long time at this point, or I guess it feels like a long time. Maybe 13 years isn't terribly long, but as far as Ms. Hanning, you brought up the concern about the water usage. South Laramie Water District was actually just had a meeting with Mr. Herman yesterday, trying to nail down those things. So I know that's something that's being addressed. One thing that I can say, being familiar with that property, the areas of the property that are used in a commercial fashion, being a shop and a kind of an office building, each of those has one water faucet. So there's not going to be a massive amount of any kind of water usage issues or anything like that out there. I know that when we first looked at the property, when it was purchased approximately 2 years ago, it was in pretty rough shape. There's a house on that property that's basically falling down. There were numerous trailers that were literally degrading into the ground. The eastern part of the lot was basically piles and piles of trash. The western part of the lot, similar. There were, I can't remember, I counted them at the time, but there were something like 120 old barrels out on that property that were filled with all kinds of things that you probably don't want to know about, much less identify. Mr. Herman has had all those things properly disposed of. He's had the property cleaned up really nicely. Yeah, obviously it's not perfect yet at this point, but it's an ongoing process. The company that's currently using the property and currently unable to use it for the purposes that they want to, they're aware of the fact that they need to keep things, as neat and clean as possible. Realistically, I just wanted to kind of come before you and say, I think that you'll see Mr. Herman do good things with this property, and I would, greatly like to see you approve his change of zoning request.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Scola? Mr. Herman, do you want to add anything to that?
I really don't have anything more to add, but I thought if you had questions for me, that's mainly why I'm here today. I think I've kind of presented what I'm trying to do here. I'm not trying to develop anything. I'm not trying to change anything. I'm just trying to help my tenant get his towing license restored. That was what precipitated this whole thing, so. I don't see anything changing, but. You know, we'll have to do whatever's decided.
Could I refer one of the earlier comments back to Mr. Gertsch? What happened in 2015, if I understand, was that's when we mapped the zoning, but it had been in place since 97. Correct?
That's correct, yeah, so 1997, when our zoning resolution was initially adopted, we adopted what the assessor had in that year as zoning, so tax classification. So, we took that, any subsequent changes, from that time on and included that into a map and then had the map adopted, with, you know, with the new, zoning designations that we had, because we did split up the residential zoning into 3 different residential zoning districts. But yeah, so in 1995, that was done. And just to, you know, to go on with some of those comments, there has been a lot of confusion throughout the years with the assessors information and with what zoning is. They've always been, I mean, from 1997 on, the assessor changed parcels, so, or chart their land use classification for taxation purposes, where the zoning stayed static, unless they came into our office and changed it. And so, I mean, we get calls from real estate agents and the appraisers in town all the time just to make sure that they're doing the right things. And the assessor's map now has a zoning layer and it has a tax classification layer as well. So all of those things that were kind of problematic in the past have been cleared up in the last few years. So so we do have that. But if there's anybody that ever needs to know what their zoning is, please contact our department.
So when you say unless they came in and changed it, I've lost your antecedent, you mean if the tax status changed or if an individual came in and asked? So
If an individual came in and asked for, I think we call it a land use change at the time, but yes.
So the map that staff attached to our report, that shows the zoning, industrial, residential, commercial, that zoning has been that way since 97. That's a fair understanding.
For the most part, yeah.
Perhaps it used to be just residential and then so it's
Smaller, based on this, like the lot size. Yeah.
and that was done in 2000. Yeah, thank you.
So I can add on to that a little bit. At the end of the staff report are a couple of maps, and that was the zoning as of 2015. And there's also a couple of pages that look like typewriter font. And that was the zoning in 97.
And is that different?
The Ortega property was zoned residential unplatted land in 1997, which was then translated in 2015 to small lot residential.
Good, thank you for that clarification. Questions?
One question, and the property is taxed as commercial?
Correct.
I got a little confused there.
Yes.
So it was taxed as commercial?
Correct.
Okay,
At some point since 1997, there was a change of the assessment.
gotcha.
But we have divorced ourselves from the tax assessment.
Yes.
To our credit, your credit. Okay. Hearing no further comments for the applicant, let's officially open public hearing on this. And so we are now open to public comment. We have no public in attendance. We have a few folks online. Mr. Johnson, Ms. Bath, or are you here to comment on the 60 last zoning district amendment? Going once, going twice. And I guess I should ask, can you hear me, Mr. Johnson, Ms. Bath?
Mr. Johnson looks like he's trying to join in another way, so he might have his video up and maybe he's trying to join with a phone or something, but he's not quite joined. So you see him in the waiting room and you see him there, so
do we think he's here for this application?
I don't know,
He talked on this, I didn't last night.
Yeah.
Okay.
but it says joining, I clicked the admit button, so I don't know what's going on, so. You might wait a second just to see.
All right, if you're hearing us, Mr. Johnson, we're, give you a minute or two.
Yeah. it keeps coming off the lines.
Yeah, another question.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, that disappeared.
If this is successful in the zoning change, then anything that happens after that doesn't come before us. But what do you do in terms of buffering and screening and things like that between residential and commercial? Is there anything you can require that way, or is it off of your point too?
So. If the use is for the existing buildings that are on the property, then there's not really a mechanism to do that. The change for zoning or for landscaping and buffering it would have to be a zoning certificate applied for. At that point, it triggers the landscaping buffering regulations. So if they decided to add on to a building or build another building, then those things could apply.
Thank you.
Looks like he's fully in. Mr. Johnson, are you with us? Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
There you are. Okay, go right
Hello.
ahead, please. You have the floor, Mr. Johnson. You had it briefly. Whatever buttons you pushed a second ago, that was the thing to do.
Yeah, it's like,
Okay, it looks like you muted yourself. Perhaps you just need to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes? Don't touch
Hello.
anything.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes?
I don't know if you can hear us.
Yes.
Hello?
You're-
Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can, yes. I don't know if you can see us, but you're good to go. I guess
you
not.
probably don't come here.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is. Maybe it's working now.
Go ahead. What sign language, right? Could speak.
They're so small. and
Yeah, you
they
can't
can't
see
see.
them.
Have to go up to the camera and give them a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Well, we can do that.
Okay, let's try this one more time. I don't know why it keeps glitching out and kicking me out.
Oh, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. So I missed part of that meeting. I'm not sure exactly what the complaints are this go around. All I know is that CT Towing, like I said before, we're here to be a good neighbor. We're here to help our neighbors out. We're here to make our community look better. We're here to provide jobs. This is our livelihood, and I feel as though we have the right to use the property for its best use. And with so many mixed zonings being around us, all we're doing is using the land or requesting to use the land in a way that is already consistent with the surrounding properties. And I know that last time there was basically a general complaint. Hello? There was a general complaint that against the zoning with no specific injury actually occurring, just the thought that there's a possibility that if it was zone commercial, an injury might happen in the future. And I respect my neighbors, but I also request that they respect the way we would like to use our land for the best use. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Just to remind ourselves, the comment that we did get last time was from a residential property owner who just felt that he wanted things to remain residential because of his ability to see the sunrise and enjoy his property. He has not seen fit to show up this hearing for whatever reasons.
And I remind you that he was representing the family.
Yeah, yeah.
And it wasn't so much about his family's property.
His family's property, correct. All right, are there other public comments? Hearing, seeing none, is there a motion to close the public hearing? I'm going to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
A second.
Discussion of that motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, done. It's back to us. What's the pleasure of the commission?
I have no comments.
Go right ahead.
I think there are several factors that we should consider when they're determinative. The first factor, in every way, is the fact there has been historic usage of the property as commercial. I believe that should dispose is considered this application positively. This has been open use. It has not been blatant disregard for zoning. No one apparently has complained about use ever. So I think that says something about the property as it stands today that we should consider. I believe we last year considered another zoning change, which is similar. That was the Watson building application, where they also had historic usage. And we granted that to reflect that historic usage, and there were no objections, as I recall. The second factor which I'm considering is looking at the graded area within which this property sits, and I'm defining it stretching all the way from the south of Shore to the north, mountain cement to the south, the railroad to the west, and 287 to the east. There is a very, very wide range of disparate uses and zoning properties. As the property sits today, looks today, it does not look out of place to my eye, and I went by it today. There are many residential properties out there which have abandoned vehicles or junk vehicles. Various items, metal debris, buildings in disrepair, in various conditions. And which again, don't look all that different from this particular property. And rezoning to commercial, I don't think it's going to reflect or result in any changes in how that property looks as it stands today. And I don't think it's going to be any different than how the other properties look. And generally, to me, my eye informs with that whole greater area. The next factor is that this property, again, this general area falls within an area identified for growth in the current comprehensive plan. And looking at especially 287, and the fact that the traffic counts have increased significantly over the past 10 years and are likely to continue to do so, and may jump considerably if and when 287 is 4 lane for Collins. This area is probably the most likely place for significant commercial industrial development in the greater community area. Both commercial and industrial uses, and when I say industrial uses, I'm thinking primarily industrial logistical, but there could be other things as well. And if you consider the likelihood of this sort of development occurring in a major way in the medium time frame, I say 5 to 10 years, granting a zoning change to commercial would fit in with what's likely to happen in the future. And would in fact, in my mind, represent a higher and better future use anyway. I don't see that there's much likelihood at all in this area would transform to some exclusive, not exclusive other end, but exclusive residential use. I think it's more likely to go away from residential use to commercial industrial as things go forward. Perhaps the staff would like to comment about that. That's my view. And then the final factor, which I think we should be giving way to, is the fact that we have a staff recommendation in favor of this. We haven't heard any substantial objections to this proposed change. And therefore, I think some deference should be given to our professional staff. Therefore, my conclusion is we should recommend approval of this property. And I have a final point. I don't presuppose what any of us might vote. I don't presuppose what the county commissioners might do either. But if this does go through, and to be a little more serious, I usually am, I would like to state that anyone who might see this or see this in the future, who thinks that if they're considering a property purchase or a use which could be regulated, they don't need to do their homework, they're wrong. Our function is not to provide a bailout for people who fail to do their due diligence. And that would actually apply to realtors as well. I understand that things may have operated differently in the past, but it's not hard to figure out what current zonings are or uses allowed in that zoning. So people don't do their due diligence, they should be prepared to bear the consequences. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other comments?
I would just like to add Michael's last comment. I was gonna say something.
Oh, great. That would be lighter again.
Yeah, I concur as well, and it's easy to fall into that. Well, we've always done it this way, and that isn't our responsibility. So I think that's a point that's well taken. As is the point that we are not approving this towing company's revivification. We're approving commercial zoning and all of the things that may or may not entail. So we should be clear what it is we're doing. My own sympathies, as I stated at the last meeting, are that in fact to meet those basic standards of compatibility and consistency with long-term vision for how we can use growing. Again, that is a subjective judgment. Other thoughts, Commissioner?
Yes, I appreciate everything that Mr. Platt said, and I don't disagree. I find this to be a challenging decision, primarily because some of our past decisions out here have been to increase housing. And I guess what I struggle with the most is that right now the city is providing water to this area that's extraterritorial for them. And I don't know if I think the best use of city water is for commercial purposes as opposed to residential purposes. When I know the city has some buyer's remorse on having agreed to run water out to areas that are not in their boundaries. And that there's a fundamental issue with water pressure for hydrants, it sounds like, for this area to become even more industrialized. And I regret that during the tabling period, I didn't reach out to the city to ask them their thoughts about it. So I'm going off past conversations with the city about why they're reluctant now to extend water out to places they have control. So I'm kind of on the fence on all of this, and I also, you know, if you just looked at the map and you didn't drive around and look at the variety of housing upkeep in the neighborhood, I'm wondering if there's a bias against the community being residential because it's a, probably a below poverty level area that we're looking at. And is that fair then to just assume that's where commercial stuff should go? So I am, like I said, I'm in conflict over what way to go on this, but I hear everything that Mr. Platt said, and I don't disagree with him on that. It's just I can't help but be concerned about some of these other aspects.
Commissioner Staff, following up on Commissioner Annex comment. For certain applications, we are required to consider the city's position within what used to be the donut. That's not the case here. Walk us through that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, any zoning applications, they've never been under the purview of the city of Laramie. It's only subdivisions of lots.
Yeah, that's exactly the answer.
And just a point of clarification too, the water is the South Laramie Water Sewer District water. They purchased it from the city, so they don't really have the city doesn't have a say. I mean, the district has to govern their water system.
Their thoughts or a motion under which we can proceed?
Mr. Chairman, I recommend the Board of County Commissioners approve the 60 West zoning district limit application ZBA -01-23. Adopting and incorporating the staff analysis, findings of fact and conclusions of law is each of stated in the staff report.
Is there a second for that motion?
My second.
Second is that we approve the application. Discussion of that motion. Hearing none, Ms. Hanning. Certainly. Aye. Correct.
Aye.
David.
Aye.
Votes aye, Sam.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you all for your input and we wish you well and certainly commend your commitment to making it a model property for the neighborhood. Thank you for your participation and we wish you good luck in your intentions to improve the property.
Okay, I didn't get to say, I did want to address thing on water because I didn't hear that was being discussed.
You are approved, you can,
Okay, I mean,
you don't need to explain anything further. You forget. Thank you. Okay. Let us move on. It's a good discussion and we learned a lot that will be valuable to us if we move into discussion in the future, I'm sure. Okay, the next chair. Yes, sir.
Want to offer our applicant a chance to.
Oh, yes, oh, yes. By all means, you are under no obligation to continue to witness our deliberations. It's not rude by any means to exit. Yes, thank you for that reminder. You're gonna miss all the fun, but okay, at a previous meeting, we were invited, the staff asked us if we had ability for looking at the possibility of expanding our zoning resolution to include accessory dwelling standards. The consensus of the board at that time was it's worth looking at. So we remain pre-decisional on this, but we are continuing to explore the possibility. So, Mr. Gersh.
Right, Mr. Chair, I brought the document up that we working from here. Yeah, so, yeah, you gave me authorization to kind of look into this and, what I've done is obviously just a simple change, always you have to go to multiple chapters to make the changes. So I'll just walk through the document real quick. So the first thing is I've added two different definitions, an accessory dwelling definition and a principal dwelling definition. That helps to differentiate what we're looking at, because we don't really have a principal dwelling defined, so we need to define that before we can define the accessory building or accessory dwelling. So I put two simple definitions on there. I did amend chapter 3, which is the zoning district chapters. I included the principal dwelling for each of those, just to differentiate again between the accessory dwelling and the principal dwelling. Also in this is kind of outside a little bit of the scope of what we're doing here, but I did in the agricultural zone, I changed it to one principal dwelling unit per 17.5 acres. Now that this doesn't change the lot size in agricultural is still stay 35 acres. But what this would allow is people that have these large acreage lots, it allow them to do a second principal structure. So they basically get to have two houses on the property. They'd have to be owned by the property owner. You know, and if somebody wanted to own the other house, you know, a mortgage lender is not going to just give you money to do that, with just the house. But that could include, I guess, a mobile home, which wouldn't have to go through mortgage or anything like that. But that's for your consideration too. If that's totally bad idea, then we don't do that.
Wait a minute, you're not gonna present us a totally bad idea, are you?
No, this would just help. This would avoid. This would avoid like some of the applications we've had in the past where someone in Walrus Ranch wants to have a second dwelling. And now they have to do the zoning change. So now they wouldn't have to change the zoning. They could just put the
No,
building
I
on.
understand that. I just want to make sure you're not deliberately presenting a bad idea.
No, I'm only presenting the best ideas. I'm
Nice.
just
That's
trying to
fine.
be boss about it. So.
Mr. Chair, just one comment, that really caught my eye when I looked through the document, because when you go to the growth plan, there is no mention of, so you know, again, we might wanna make sure that if we do adopt this, that it carries through for what we do in the future.
Sure.
Just,
Okay.
because we only have 35 acres in that growth plan. In agricultural, nothing about the 17
Sure.
option.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay, let's, why don't you go through it and then we'll come back
Okay,
around here.
yep.
And pepper you with questions.
Awesome. Okay, we'll move on to the land use table. I added the accessory dwelling there. Allowed in agricultural, rural residential, small lot residential, and urban residential, and then prohibited in all the non-residential types of zones, commercial, industrial, neighborhood business. And then chapter 6, this is where the standards come. And this is where I think we need to have our discussion this is where most of the discussion should be, because these are the standards. And these came from my reviews of other areas that have similar regulations. I think there's 3 counties in Wyoming that I reviewed their regulations, as well as I think I looked at Laramie counties as well. And then obviously I've done some other research and found a really good PowerPoint on these that I went through that has led to what I have here. You got the purpose, zoning districts, we've just led to the zoning or to the land use table. Number of accessory dwellings, 1, setbacks, just whatever the zoning district requires. Minimum lot size, property with, we have 3 different, I guess, categories. If they have on-site water and wastewater, so if they have a septic system and a well, it would have to be at least 2 acres. 1 acre for if they have a centralized water or wastewater system, so one or the other. They're hooked up to South Laramie Water and Sewer District water, and they can go down to 1. They have to have at least 1 acre. Property with both centralized water and sewer, which the only area in the county right now that has both of those services would be in Centennial. And they have both of those in some of the areas in there. Size, accessory dwelling shall not exceed the 15,000 square feet or 75% of the gross floor area. The principal dwelling, whichever is greater.
1,500.
1,500. 15,000 square feet, yeah.
It's not Jackson.
No, sorry. And then I've got it prohibited in the aquifer protection overlay zone. And then there's some language about small wastewater systems. And in this kind of section here, the areas that I would point out that you might want to look at is minimum lot size, the square footage of the principal structure or the accessory building. Yeah. I mean, there's also other things you could do. You could do height limits. I saw another, actually, I was looking at Salt Lake County. They have and others require this, that the owner of the, I'm not sure if I put that in here, it is, but the owner of the building or of the property has to be either living in an accessory building or an accessory unit or the principal unit. So, and I'm not sure if I made that got in here or not. I don't think I think so. Yeah, but that's an option to look at. And what Salt Lake did was they had an affidavit that somebody had a sign saying that I will be living on the property. And if they moved, someone else had to sign that if they wanted to use to do the same thing. So you could also prohibit other things like short-term rentals. That's a big thing. I've kind of kept these base bone. They're pretty general. They're pretty lenient, which is actually what the planning community is supporting, is more lenient restrictions for these, just to support or promote these additional units, just because it does provide other living space and that may not. I mean, some of the benefits, the person that owns the principal structure can now pay their mortgage, or because they've got this accessory unit, or another family can live there and maybe it's cheaper than other places, or who knows. But anyways, that's where it's starting from. We can look at this, we can hack it up, we can throw it out. It's up to you guys. I think it's good.
Okay. Let's do a kind of round robin question. Tammy.
Yes, I have a few questions. Does it say in here that you would only be allowed one accessory dwelling per parcel?
Yes,
So you couldn't have a basement one and then an outbuilding?
correct.
Okay. Would you want to state that the accessory dwelling must be single family as opposed to multifamily? Is there a limitation that we should be?
Meaning like two different families live in the same unit, or?
Like, could you make an accessory dwelling that could house two families if you didn't explicitly say? Or
That would be multiple dwellings.
Okay, so.
Yeah, so
that's a
no.
different definition, so
Yeah.
just definition, okay. With the breaking up of the allowing two principal dwellings on an agricultural lot. Would you later have somebody coming in and wanting to subdivide that lot into two lots?
I mean, that's a possibility. I mean, somebody could, but they could do it without the two buildings on there too. So.
Right, okay, so either way, they can do that. One thing that crossed my mind would be, instead of making it on the land use table, making it all allowed for the different residential categories, would be to make it conditional. I don't know if that'd be a pain for you, but I wonder, I guess we don't have a way to incorporate neighbors' opinions, but you sort of want to give them a chance to maybe voice their opinions. So I don't know, I'm just wondering if that would be better to make conditional. Then let's see, yeah, I agree, we should think more about some of the square footage height limits. I like the owner lives on site idea, because I think that keeps it from And you know, that they're gonna care about what's going on themselves. So I like that addition. And then my last question is, do you see, like especially the smaller lot sizes, that someone would need to just have their on-site wastewater system be built to accommodate the flow volume of both dwellings entering one system? Or are you envisioning that there would be two systems out there, what I consider a small lot?
I mean, it could be either way, depending on the lot. I mean, that if there's already existing house on the property and then they have another one that they're adding to, it would probably be difficult to just connect it into an existing system unless it was already built to a higher standard than what it was required to. Because any one bedroom would add, you know, effluent to the leach field, which would have to be accounted for. And if they didn't build their, you know, think about that before they did it, they'd probably have to either build another one or, yeah, I don't know if you would add to a leach field.
So some existing lots that have septic in a well might have setback problems from the get-go. Being able to accomplish this spatial,
For a smaller lot, yeah, absolutely.
but someone could look at composting toilet.
Which they do, yeah. I mean, we see a lot of the tiny houses and some of those things that a lot of the few that I've seen, they've got composting toilets. They still need to put their gray water somewhere. It needs to go into some kind of a field.
Right.
But yeah, they can do that without like a tank and those types
Thanks.
of things.
But let's just go around.
My one question was concerning, you mentioned it, why limit to 20,000 feet and over minimum lot size. And I was just thinking to myself, you know, if you have a house with a garage and what they want to do is build on top of the garage, it really wouldn't matter what lot size it was at that point if they just went up.
Sure, or they could use the garages there.
Or essentially the garage as well.
Yeah,
So anyway, I just wondered about if we needed to make, it had to be 20,000 feet or over, if we could go smaller than that. And actually, I didn't go around and take a look at the city lot size and see what a small lot was, see if it was 100 by 200 feet or much smaller than that. But that was
yeah.
just one thing. And as a comment, all my colleagues, actually, everyone here, I've just come back from a trip to the southeast and back. I was there for 3 weeks. Everywhere I went, when I was in local news, affordable housing was a big topic. And ADUs came up again and again and again. I know there's been a big initiative that I think has just been passed in Colorado, where the state has superseded municipalities and much liberalized. It's not enacted, the governor's proposing it. And the city's not happy, but basically forcing more liberal abilities to make you know, for denser residential areas possible, to get around the fact that so many places that are NIMBYs and people to allow this sort of things. Same thing in California. So that's just a general comment. It's a big topic everywhere.
Sure. Yeah, well, the housing.
And I know it matters. I have one other fun thing. I know it matters to Commissioner Gosar. I've had that conversation with him. I have not talked to Sue about affordable housing, but it should matter all the time. Else? At this point,
I'm just like on the size thing, if you have this really massive house and you can go 75% of that size again, it's 2 really big houses. To me, that doesn't seem so much like an accessory dwelling. I'm wondering, I mean, it says whichever is greater, I would almost want to go whichever is less. Like 1,500 feet seems like enough for an accessory dwelling.
Yeah, and a lot of places actually have lower than that. I mean, there's the 1,200. I think the one I looked at in Laramie County, it was all based on like percentages of, you know, existing, you know, houses or whatever. So if it was 2,000, then it could be this big, or if it was, you know.
Problem is some of them are
But, yeah.
10,000.
Yeah.
And, you know, it would just be huge.
Yeah, and the language for this I did take from somewhere else, and the whichever is greater, that was something I thought about too, and I was like, well, we'll just throw it in. So, but yeah, we could.
I like it better. Just off the top of my head without having to. So. And I would think the setbacks would take care of the neighbors mostly. Starting. I think, I mean, as the mother of a 20-some-year-old son, they'll never be able to afford to buy a house. And I think that affordable housing is a really big thing. We should let people add to their properties in ways that help them buy their house and use some property. That's all.
So I have to declare a conflict of interest in this one.
Okay.
Because when I bought my place 23 years ago, it already had an accessory building that was plumbed and connected to everything. And I have been, I upgraded it, made it better, more energy efficient, but it was there already. And I'm renting it out. I've been renting it out since 2002. I have to say to mostly graduate students, I have to say that it is a great source of income. Even with my faculty salary, it adds quite a bit, and it's going to be even more important when I retire. And it offers grad students, people who temporary dwellers in Laramie, an opportunity to have a nice house, have dogs. I have fenced in area for their dogs, and I'm personally in support, but I can't, because I'm in this situation. I don't feel comfortable voting or anything like that. I would say that I violate only one of these overlay. But this was the first house built on that subdivision, the one I live in. It was built that way. In fact, underneath it, there was a bomb shelter. It was built during the Cold War. It had a water tank that collected water from the roof. It had power to underneath. I didn't know it existed until the floor fell out. Luckily, it was a dog that jumped on and broke the floor. It took 3 cement trucks to fill in that hole.
You can't crowd into your bomb shelter with you now.
Not anymore. I mean, it was hazardous. It was falling apart, but yeah. So it's been there for decades, and I take advantage of it. So I declare it as a fact.
Well, thank you for your confession. We'll be talking to you later. No, actually, so before 2015, you could actually have 2 dwellings on a property anywhere. So,
really?
yeah. So
I
it was legal, I'm sure, when you did it. So.
I don't think even the 97 plan.
Be non-conforming.
The house was built in 1961.
Yeah.
So the whole system, and I have
Yeah, sure.
more acreage, and I meet all the requirements except the over. And I would say that many of my neighbors have these accessories, again, built way back when. Many of them have elderly parents living in the apartments. So that's another important use. We want, we have healthcare problems in Wyoming, and it's nice to keep elderly people at home. And that's another option. Yeah, but I will not be voting.
I think we'd be okay to vote.
Yeah, I don't say you have a conflict of interest. I don't know.
I will leave it to Mr. Aaron.
We can address this.
Okay. We aren't voting on anything. All right, you have any thoughts before?
No, I think, I agree with, Diana have comment that it should be less because. Yeah, no. Other than that, I think this is, and my comment on the 17.5, I have no objection to it, I'm just saying it needs to be consistent.
Sure.
Okay, well, I'll be the percent here. And let them- The global question I have. We can get into the specifics of this are. Big rural residential. Now, this zoning that we've established for Albany County, it says a 5-acre minimum lot size. I'm assuming that that came from some desire to maintain a certain density of habitation on the landscape. Same with 35-acre minimum lot sizes and with the exception of APOZ, which has its special circumstances, then we have small lot residential, but we have these various lot sizes that we've established to reflect our interest in how the Albany County landscape is occupied. To me, this is simply cutting all those in half. So how do you respond? Like say, if it's at a global level, I mean, what's the difference effectively between this and just saying, okay, rural residential is now 2.5 acre lots instead of 5? And how does this escape the same filter that was used to establish those occupation densities in the first place?
So, I mean, first I'd point out that rural residential, you can actually have a 2-acre lot size, right? But, you know, over a subdivision, it would be 5-acre average.
But still, the idea was we wanted a certain density limitation on residences, folks, impact, agricultural values, open space, whatever it is that was behind those initial zonings. Categories.
Well, I mean, if I could go back to our 1997 regulations, like I said, a 5-acre parcel, you could have build 2 residences, or a 2-acre parcel, you could go do 2 buildings on that. So, I mean, what's the difference? Well, ownership. You're not creating 2 lots. You don't have to, if you have 5 acres, you don't have to cut it in half and then have 2 lots to get 2 residential buildings on them or 2 houses on them. You can just have 1 house. I mean, I don't think it's changing the way of thinking. I'm, you know, going from what we had in 1997 going forward. Other than, I mean, obviously it can create some more density because you're going to have multiple units. Will the units be similar in size, similar in scope? They'll have to be smaller, right? So there'll be a smaller unit, there'll be less impact. Will there be traffic impacts? Yes, they will have additional traffic. It does, I mean, I don't know if things have already been developed at 5 acres lots or 10-acre lots or 35-acre lots. To me, it's already a residential use. If you add another building on there with, you know, an outbuilding or something that has an apartment in it, you're not causing a huge difference in what's going on, and it's not going to happen across the board. Just because you own something doesn't mean that everybody's going to do that. Just because you allow this doesn't mean everybody's going to do that. I don't know if it's trying to. We're not. I guess the addition of these is more to address issues that we're having now, and less about worrying about, I guess, density.
I would also say that we're already doing this. We have changed zoning from ag to rural residential to allow this to happen. We have changed small lot residential to commercial to allow this to happen. And by doing those, changing those zones, that opens up that parcel to a bunch of other things, like we just saw, small lot residential to commercial, it allows for a bunch of stuff. An ag piece of 40 acres, you can go down to 8 lots if you change it to rural residential. So this opens up the ability to have an extra house without changing the zoning and opening up all those possibilities.
Well, that's precisely my point is, let's just not have zoning. People do whatever they want to. I mean, and we change zoning on a case by case basis as we feel is compatible, as we just did with the commercial zone. We thought that was compatible with the neighborhood. Now presumably people are buying a lot, and then the fact that we used to do it that way, again. Somebody in 2015 decided they didn't want to do it that way. And well, it's fair to assume that that was because they wanted these lower densities. And the reflection of that is, as we see in the comp plan, would be things like preservation of open space, the interest in ag. So we don't have to change somebody's zone to ag. We could, and on a spot basis. I think it was a mistake to do that out in the wild horse ranches. For exactly those reasons. To say, oh, it doesn't matter because no one's gonna do it, that's no reason. As we started this meeting with that discussion, you are saying you are welcome to do this. And so you should expect people to take you up on that offer as they see fit. So we have people who are buying lots, and we've heard them in complaints about zoning changes over the years. I bought a lot because everybody was zoned agricultural. I expected it to be 40 acres. I expected that to be the environment to which I was thinking my life savings would be looking at your heartstring kinds of stories. And now I find that, oh, it wasn't 40 acre lots, it's really only 20s. And everybody around me wants to put in an extra house. They want to open up an Airbnb. The folks on the North Fork of Centennial there, if you recall, they were quite upset with the number of rentals, that kind of high value property out there. Something like this would clearly facilitate folks, recreational environment, putting in second homes. So again, the global question is, are we prepared to back off our previous decisions on what's an acceptable density? And to do this is a yes. You've got a good density, you're doubling the densities or allowing the densities to double. So I'm just wanting us to be clear on what we're doing as we go forward.
That is undoubtedly true. I would turn the question back around. And if you think about the greater community, and I'm talking about everything with the growth area and Laramie, and say, where do the next 20,000 people go? Do they go out and migrate for lots, which a lot of them will be able to afford, and take up a whole lot of rural residential space? Or do we densify? I think that's the primary choice we have before, as we go forward.
Okay, and then growth area management plan suggests to us that we should look at Laramie as a core of the population for Albany County and decrease our density as we go forth from there. So I think it's a false choice to say you want to scatter people across Albany County at 5 acre density or 2 acre density. No, I think as we move forward in more responsive zoning to our aspirations for the county as reflected in the comp plan, it would be things like priority growth areas 1, 2, 3, 4. It would not be this just blanket invitation to double the density of residential across the entire county. So my preference would be to handle this on a case by case basis, to roll it into the growth area management plan and to address Commissioner Platt's concern, to focus on residential development.
Question that concern.
Okay. So that's what the growth area management plan is about. And yes, higher densities under just conventional planning should be concentrated near these urban centers, places where services can be provided in an efficient way, which is what the comprehensive plan does through its identification of growth areas 2 and 3. And that's just a very different approach to what is the acceptable density of development in Albany County than something that just says everybody that's zoned agricultural now has the right to 17.5 acre lots instead of 25. I have a number of specific comments on how this is put together, but that's my just general question. And are you the planning staff coming to us and saying we think it is appropriate to half all of the minimum lot sizes in the county?
So this doesn't affect lot sizes at all. So, no.
Okay,
that's
double
answer
the
to your
density.
question.
Let's not,
Now, density, yes. Are we prepared to allow people to have, an apartment in their outbuilding? Well, let's get real, people do, and they're not telling us, honestly. And we do get a lot of people asking about these apartments, and this is what I foresee happening. On larger lots, people are buying lots, they're putting in their residences, and they want to put in an outbuilding with an apartment so that they can have families stay there. That is probably one of the biggest things that we see in our office, or people ask us about, and we say, no, absolutely not, we can't do this. There's no way to do it. Or here, you're on ag land, now you have to change to rural residential, and you have to get a conditional use permit. What this does is makes it easier for what we have every time approved so far. Do we have to every time approve it? No, but does it make it more streamlined of a process? Yes. Is there a housing problem? Yes. Are we trying to fix problems? Yes. But would it cause more problems with additional density? I don't know. I mean, that's a question for debate. I mean, you know, if you have 5 acres, you're going to have potentially another septic system. But we already allow 2-acre lots and 1-acre lots to have a septic system. If they have 1 acre with water, is that going to cause us a big problem? Is it truly going to double the density? I would say no, it's not going to truly double the density. People don't have the money to do that on all these properties. I mean, this is accepted practice, you know, throughout the planning community right now. This is what planners are offering to their communities to help with problems such as housing, affordability in some instances, helping not just affordability for the person that lives in the accessory dwelling, but a way for the person that lives in the principal structure to pay for that problem. So will it cause more density? Yes. So I don't think this is I can't address what you're trying to get at, Chair Hinckley, but I think this does provide other solutions to other problems. I guess we have to weigh whether a little bit more density and, you know, these other potential solutions to some of these other things, what's more important for our community. And maybe this is something that we really need to get into with the public to see what they think, and you know, I don't know.
Well, even if you, well, I think what you would find is those who had aspirations to do this. I think it's a great idea. The neighbors will all say, no, that isn't what I contracted for. And as far as they're going to do it anyway, again, that doesn't strike me as a very good answer. And then we just have that discussion with respect to the gentleman south of town here.
Right.
It's not our job to make things legal that aren't. And then just to bring you into this, just a shining example of this was this fellow out in Wilders had 35-acre lots on agricultural. He decided he wanted to build a bigger house because he didn't like the one he was on. So he came into us and asked for zoning change to rural residential with the intention of just all he wanted was a way to get a second dwelling, and that was what was offered to us. Well, another answer, the one that we got, which was to allow a lot subdivision. Well, he should have bought a different lot. His eyes should have been open when he walked in there. He didn't like the house. He should have bought a blank lot and built whatever house he wanted to. Bought a lot that had a big house on it, rather than coming to this body and saying, well, I made a mistake and I want you guys to help me correct it. So I think one buys a piece of property and they do the due diligence and they understand the limitations of that. And those are advantages to them as well as disadvantages. All right. So again, I'm quite concerned about us backsliding on one of the fundamental tenets of zoning, which is density. And that shows up as traffic and noise and dogs and light pollution, all the things that make it different to live in a 5-acre or 35-acre situation than to live in a 2.5-acre situation. So we also have family exemptions, so people can subdivide whatever they want to. If it's a matter of I want to subdivide and sell it to grandma.
Well, if they meet the criteria.
If they meet the criteria. So if we're gonna do this, I'd like to, let's tailor this specifically if we can to these situations which do tug at our heartstrings. Like the mother-in-law house, or the kids need a place to live. And as far as one last thought, and then I'll get off the soapbox here, affordable housing is not $250,000, $500,000 now. Rural properties, it's people who want to come to town and find a place to live where they can buy into a $200,000. The city's housing study specifically identified the need for available housing under $200,000. That's not what we're talking about. Here, if people come to us and say, I want to subdivide and provide affordable housing, I don't, this is a solution to that. Not that they shouldn't do it, but
Well, they're probably not gonna be purchasing because it's, the property's already been purchased, it'd be a rental.
okay, so somebody has to rent it at a level that's enough to pay off the mortgage, which is going to be substantial. All right, so I have a lot of individual comments here, but let's. General comment.
So, yeah, no, I get
Okay,
this.
go ahead, please.
So is there anything about the like total number of buildings on these lots, like in our little 5-acre subdivision, lots of people had outbuildings. If they wanted to turn that into an ADU, I mean, the building is already there, so it's increasing the density of people, but not the density of buildings, right? So is your concern the density of people or the density of buildings or both?
Well, I think basically people, it's both, but it's the people who bring all of this.
That's
everything
true.
with that.
Now then also, as you said, we can define it however we want. We could say basements and garages, which are not extra buildings, but would be extra people. But that wouldn't increase the density. I'm thinking of like empty nesters, like myself. I was like, house is way too big now. We could easily make it into 2 units, but covenants would be an issue, but it would fit. You know, and it's already sized, the septic is already sized for that, and the traffic used to be there until the kids grew up and moved away. And, I mean, I can think of scenarios where it wouldn't really cause us problems. And I can also think about my neighbors who already have the outbuildings. You know, how many outbuildings do we want? Could we include something about that?
Yeah, we don't limit outbuildings, so you can have a house.
Go ahead.
About the mother-in-law type of apartments building. Mother-in-laws tend to die, so you build, you get a permit, you have the apartment over your garage. And then your elderly parent that you build it for dies. What are you gonna do now? You're not gonna rent it out? No?
Right, you are going to.
You are going to rent it out, so I think what, Mr. Birch is trying to tell us is, it's happening anyway, under that,
We hope not a lot, but
I mean, people die.
when we tell people the rules, they change their plans and it's like, do they really change their plans? We don't really have inspection, we can't go in people's places and check them out, so, you know.
The tax assessor. It's nice.
David, outside of inspector zoning. So the Laramie area and a couple other centers of population such as Daniel Rocker and whatnot. The density of the overall county, stripping out those concentrations, but it's still very, very low, very, very undense, correct?
Yeah.
And it's not changing rapidly, is it?
No, and you know, and the lots, I mean, they're already subdivisions, you know, they're already there, so it's not like we're creating chaos across the county, it's just in the areas where they already have the subdivisions.
I mean, so what I'm thinking is just in very general terms, if you double the population of rural Albany County, it's not very many people. And it's only a small portion of the population, probably correct?
Yeah, I don't know what it is, 3,000, 6,000.
Yeah, it's a big county.
87% of the population of the county lives.
I'd say.
Well, the majority lives around it too, the rural people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More just around.
I'm just thinking if you drive up, 15 miles north of Laramie and someone's got an ADU, you would not notice the traffic there. So if it's, part of the house, you probably wouldn't notice the visual difference either. And if it helps out that family a lot, they are happier and. You know, I think it's a good thing.
So, Mr. Chair, so, I mean. I understand your point, I understand where you're coming from, I mean, there's things that we can do with this proposal to. You know, somewhat address those, you know, Commissioner Hanning mentioned conditional uses, which. You know, it's a catch, I don't know, it's like, we're trying to make it easier so people can just do some of these things and not have to come through a big process. But at least it would be better than what the process is now. So a conditional use will bring it to you guys. We could adjust the minimum lot size standards. So let's say, I mean, we could even change it per zone. It's like, it's rural residential, you have to have 10 acres and then you still got your 5-acre density. Or if it's small lot residential, you have to have 4 acres, then you have your 2 lot, you know, 2-acre density or whatever. I mean, there's things that we can do to finagle this and, you know, to maybe meet your concerns as well as everybody else's, like, you know, so, but I don't know if that's your only concern, but I'm just saying, I'm open, I'm pitching this, I like it kind of the way it is, I want it to be as easy for people to use as possible, but.
I mean, I guess one concern I didn't bring up, but I like what you're talking about in terms of lot sizes, is, you know, loading up the aquifer with more septic and leach fields is going to give us more groundwater contamination, whether you're in the APOZ or not. So talking about what you're doing with, like, okay, it's gotta be 10 acres if you're gonna do this, would certainly address that, you know, the only other thing I can think of that would address that would be to say, you let the ADUs be in the fringe around Laramie, because eventually we see that getting sewered someday. As opposed to putting that density change out into places where everybody's working off of private wells and they're not gonna be on a water system or a sewer system anytime in the foreseeable future. So I guess I didn't mention it in my original concern, but I would be concerned about the increase to groundwater contamination from a greater density of septic systems. But the way you're talking about controlling for the lot size, like if you got a lot this size, then we can talk. If it's not the size, then buy a different lot. That would address my concerns about septic density.
Well, that's certainly a valid concern. We can all agree on that.
But I think, don't you have a sentence that says this does not apply to the overlay zone?
In the aquifer.
Yeah, it doesn't apply to the aquifer protection. Yeah, you can't have them in the.
Yes. But
Mr. Chairman.
there's still gonna cause groundwater contamination out in the county where people are getting their water supplied from private wells. Even if it's not the vulnerable Casper aquifer area, it's still gonna result in groundwater contamination that people with shallower wells will be pulling into their house.
Since she's here, I wonder if Commissioner Ibarra would like to make any comments about this.
Yeah, I was just gonna address Commissioner Hinckley to see if I could ask something. As far as conditional use, I'm wondering, Commissioner Hinckley mentioned briefly Airbnb. Now, Airbnb doesn't serve to help with affordable housing. That's just building a unit there and making money, and anybody comes and goes, whether they stay for a month, if they stay, you know, in more extended time, or more likely over the weekend, something like that. With that, that doesn't address affordable housing, so could something like that be put into conditional use? Because otherwise, while it's not creating density, it is creating a come and go a lot more than, you know, maybe somebody who lives there permanently, the constant and having guests throughout the year.
So are you saying,
Is it, that's
apply
what
to
being
this or
addressed
just?
here, right?
Yeah, no, but I will say that, other other jurisdictions, they do have that in there that just allows short, or doesn't allow short-term rentals, it's prohibited. So that would be something that could be put in.
Right.
Yeah,
That was my only concern, because if we're trying to sell this as a way of allowing family to help other family members or addressing the need for housing, somebody could just build another unit and then make money by being Airbnb. That doesn't do either.
sure, right, yeah. Those are plenty in some communities, not so much here, but
Yeah.
well, the North Fork area especially, actually, they would. Yeah. That could be addressed pretty easily. Well, we could put it in here, whether we can know where everything is and enforce it out.
Well, this is happening in town, just in our neighborhood, where there's that house right in the alley. 12, between 11th and 12th, huge house being built up where the principal house is sitting in front. And I just feel bad for the neighbors around, because they'll go with some of their sunset or some of their morning sun, but also they can you ride into the smaller houses like that, because there was no place else to go but straight up. But it was a family who was wanting to build their home, this new home, and then allow the smaller home to be either a rental or for family visiting. It is happening in town.
Oh, and the same question, whether it's ag versus rural residential, it goes down to R1, R2. Do you want to live in a neighborhood where it's single family homes on large lots or not? And one buys into and then prices reflect that. What you should get into. And so, yeah, it all just scales. All right, well, not, it seems to me that the sense of the commission is go forward with this, but let us perhaps find a way to tailor it a little more closely. Let me just run through a few quick comments on your piece here that might be helpful as you rework it. Your definitions, subordinate to me does not mean anything in particular. So you need to, if you're going to define an accessory dwelling as subordinate, you need to tell me what subordinate is. And your definition of principal dwelling, and you simply repeated the name. A principal dwelling is a principal building. That's a principal dwelling. So we're going to try to distinguish an accessory building from a principal building. I think we need to work on those much more tightly. And I think it speaks to some of this discussion. An accessory building is not just another house where you built, you bought into a 5-acre subdivision and decided that you wanted to be a 2.5 acre. I agree with you that the agricultural piece is a completely different question.
It is, yeah, we can take that out.
So I would think for now, we might leave that alone and say we're going to allow the second dwelling, if we're going to allow it at all, and not worry about changing our underlying density. On the table of uses, as I look at those, we allow multifamily dwellings as a conditional use in rural residential, for example. And in agricultural, we allow multifamily dwellings. So talk to us just a little bit about the difference between this and our previous discussion about multifamily dwellings.
So multifamily dwelling is one building that has more than one living unit in it. So kitchen and bathroom, bedrooms in one, kitchen, bathroom, bedrooms in the other. What the standard that's attached to these two when it comes to density is they have to meet the density requirements of that area. So if you have an ag parcel that's 1,000 acres, you can have that many dwelling, you divide it by 35 and you can have that many units in your multifamily building or whatever. Same with rural residential. If you have 10 acres, then you can have 2 dwellings. Or if you have 15, you can have, all in one building. So multifamily refers to multiple dwelling units within the same building.
Okay, no, you've answered that well. So, for example, I see multi-family dwellings as allowed by right in ag zones. But that would mean 2 dwellings on a 70-acre piece, multi-family on 35. No, that's okay. Good answer. Thank you. One of my notes here was, what does it mean protecting the character of the neighborhood? And I think that would speak to things like the rentals. And I'm remembering those ones in North Carolina. I understand not that we have to pander to them, but I think they basically the point that they didn't want to turn their community into a rental community. When you write under item A, may include dwellings such as basement apartments or garages or detached dwellings, such as guest houses or apartments with in and out building. Again, those would be examples, but what's actually permitted would be a full-scale separate house, garage, septic, dog run, whatever, correct? Okay, so we need to be careful about our examples, not making us think that we're limiting it more than we are.
Okay.
Unless we do want to limit it, which I think we do. Okay, a property, neither property nor lot are defined. So when you write one accessory dwelling would be allowed per property, per parcel ownership, I guess.
Sure.
Again, we need some definitions to go with these. And then when I look at minimum lot, so what's a lot? It isn't the same as a parcel, apparently. What is it? Then for item E, you use the term lot size. What's a lot?
To me, when we'll talk about lots, it's a defined parcel property within a subdivision. But where is it defined? I don't know, but we use lot all throughout this.
But here you don't mean a lot, like a parcel.
We define parcel
Resolution. A parcel is an ownership, yes. What's that? A parcel is, I own this piece.
It's under the subdivision resolution, which is the general definition for it. It's a singularly conveyable piece of property.
That isn't what we're talking about here, then, is it? You're gonna allow me a second dwelling on my property, but I can't sell that piece off,
No, otherwise it would be a subdivision.
right?
Right, so you could sell the lot with both of the houses on the property, but how you'd have to.
Right, but what's the lot, when you say the minimum lot size will be 2, 1, and so forth acres, you don't mean lots in terms of sellable chunks. You just-
Yes, we do,
Yeah.
yes,
You do.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
The minimum lot size for an additional dwelling, but this is an additional dwelling on an existing parcel or lot or property.
Right.
That's where I'm confused.
Yeah, so, I mean, lots is referring to our zoning standards. We have lot size, we have density, we have setbacks. And lot would be the conveyable portion or the conveyable property, that whatever the property lines of that, whatever's on the deed, that's the lot. And maybe lot's not the right word to use here.
Well, it seems to me that this is confusing because I'm in a rural residential subdivision where my minimum lot parcel ownership size is 5 acres. And now you're telling me that for the additional dwelling, the minimum lot size is 2 acres. So that's where I'm confused that we have some definitional issues here between. I have a 5 acre lot and I build a second home on it. I can't sell that piece. I'm in a subdivision that doesn't allow me to.
Right. What this is saying in this, or what it's supposed to say, is that to have an accessory dwelling, your lot has to be at least 2 acres in size. That's what we're trying to say. Is that property that's on your, defined by your deed, has to be at least 2 acres in size to do that, to have that accessory. We're not redefining the existing property. We're not saying, okay, well, because of this regulation, you can now have 2 lots within a 5 acre parcel. That's not what it's saying at all. It's just saying the minimum is 2 acres to do this.
So I could not do this on an urban residential lot, because it's already less than 2.
If you have both, you have.
If it was- Yeah, if it's urban residential, it has to have a connection already. That's part of the zoning. So if it would have to be at least 1 acre or more. Or it could be 20,000 square feet, if.
Okay. All right, well, maybe the point there would be just to think through how this relates to minimum lot size subdivisions. And our use of lots and properties and parcels and so forth. Just for thick-headed folks like me to understand what we're doing. The 1,500 square feet, 75%, I agree with Ms. Harnick that that's, again, if we really want this to be the apartment for a little extra rent or for the mother-in-law, then let's try to make it say that rather than it simply being an open invitation to build another house that would not be allowed under your subdivision.
The point of this further discussion or departure point, we could just go ahead and say, not exceed 1,500 feet. Leave it at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, or 1,200.
Yeah.
600,
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so that's something. Okay, well, those were my just thoughts as I read through this to make it coherent. Because we are fully defined, and everybody's clear on what we're doing. But then I would invite staff and my colleagues to think about how to make this do the things that we are sympathetic to, which is to some extent additional income, accommodating the family, the kids. I'm sympathetic to that, but I'm most resistant to it, again, just being a blanket doubling the permissible density across the county.
I think regulating the lot sizes can solve that problem.
Okay, that's all I got. Thank you for your indulgence. Other thoughts on this? And I guess the program going forward, that you will try to incorporate some of this.
I will try.
Now that we're seeing language, if folks have things to suggest, let's send them to Mr. George. Try to tighten some.
Sounds like a plan.
Sound fair? Yeah. Thank you.
Good discussion, thank you.
Do you want to take a short break before we proceed?
Yes.
Oh, you know, that's.
Okay, 12-hour party, so you can't
We've been here.
Oh, really?
You're on a tape right here, that's it.
So I lied.
Okay, all right, let's move on to CAP and that's to moratorium. Yeah, maybe I could just.
Go ahead. You know, just my.
We put the version 5 of the CAP out for review, if you recall, with our amendments at our last meeting and scheduled a public hearing on April 26th. And that will be here? No.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks for that schedule.
All my idea.
Great. Giving a big ring.
I agree with that.
Okay, the city planning commission met on the 27th, and I attended that meeting just to see what they had to say. They had scheduled to not have a discussion, but they had or not have an action, but they did have their own discussion. So just to report back, that it's very similar to ours. That city planning commission is quite sympathetic to moving the CAP forward. They had a number of small issues. Mr. Moody kind of was the same role as me, where he read it with much more care and had all the stuff. And they ended up coming out of that with this notion that there were going to be a lot of small editorial things, the kind of thing that we given them. And they won't pick it up again until their meeting on the 24th, at which point they're scheduled to take action. So the expectation is the city planning on the 24th, 2 days before our meeting, will be presented with a red line strikeout of the version 5. None of which was considered to be substantive at their meeting. Now, that's a subjective judgment, but everything they discussed were about this a little bit here, change this, just to make it clearer. And they will be putting out a packet for that meeting on the 24th, sometime in the previous week, like say that Friday, the 21st or so. So what I'm thinking is that, I guess I'm directing my thoughts to Mr. Gersh, Bird Dog that, we all had access to that document that they're going to be discussing on that Monday. That would be going to start our discussion on that Wednesday. And they will be incorporating all of the small amendments that we made at our last meeting. So the program, we'll see how it goes. There's always opportunity for someone to come in with a smoking gun at the last minute. Would be that what we will see at our public hearing on the 26th of April will be quite a lot of small changes. And Derek Teeney, the city planning director, was going to try to divide those into just a fog of kind of consent agenda things like, yeah, let's just approve it in a one big whack. And if there are things that require specific discussion, then they will try to bring those out. So again, if this works as smoothly as I hope it will, we will be presented with a document that's provable, certifiable by us up to the county commission. We will, of course, take comments ourselves over the remainder of our 30-day period and at our public hearing. Now, if we agree with whatever they come up with, and we determine any changes since we put ours out for review to be non-substantive, then we can certify the CAP on at that point. If we do not agree, or agree but consider the changes to have been substantial, then we will need to amend it and go back around, repost it for another planning and zoning hearing. Now, anything wrong with that? I'm looking at Mr. Ayers. Does that sound copacetic? I understand the procedure, possible procedure.
Yeah, I mean, I have not seen the amendments that come from city planning. And so long as they are in fact not substitute.
So we'll be looking to yourself to make those, help us make those determinations as well. But it's the meeting that I attended, the tenor of that was all small stuff.
Yeah.
I think right probably the biggest amendments were the ones that you had offered at our last meeting in terms of some of the relationship to the state statutes.
Well, yeah, I mean, then that's encouraging that they're not substantive.
I mean, so those, we made those, and those, whether they're substantive or not, if they accept them, then they're done. Right, anything we did before we put it out for review could be substantive as it wants to be. Now we're in this period that we do make substantive changes. Come back around. Okay, right. So we'll just have to wait and see what that looks like, but look for that towards the end of that week, the 21st or so. And if you'll make sure that we all get a copy of what they're getting. So we're sort of in this back and forth, but trying to come to agreement with something that we all, yes, let's go. Have we gotten any comments? So far in our 30-day. Okay. Yeah.
You're gonna just your little, your recent document, and then Sue provided her, Commissioner Mayor provided her, just a little grammar. Really minor.
We've got it. And so anyway, I think those are all still open, and right now it's all going to be consolidated in this document, the city plan.
Chair Hinckley,
Yes, ma'am.
you be willing to meet with me before that, so we can go over some of my questions. So I'm not going into the meeting, not understanding some things.
Sure, and just to let you all in on that, there was a question that Commissioner and David asked Mr. Gerich about boundaries and so forth, which is copied to me, and I tried to respond, just here are all the maps and so forth. So I'm certainly available as a general scientific resource on a one-by-one basis. If you'd like to do that, I certainly have.
Yeah, I would like to do that because you had more questions.
But yeah, you come by my office, I will roll out maps.
That would be great.
And I
You may end up getting appointed something.
Yeah, that's what I'm here. Right, if it does move forward to the county commission, then they will decide how long they want to post it, but required to post it for a short period of time. Then we will turn to amending the zoning regulations. Or. Yeah. So. Then a question then, what is the status of the Stantec recommendations on zoning resolution changes? Will we have that document before us?
So yeah, Mr. Chair, the recommendation, we have the recommendations. I don't think they've changed on this. They finished it last time.
Well, they marked up the old whatever regs on the last one. So what the last thing we saw from them was a red line of the November 2021s.
Okay.
Okay, and those aren't the current rules. So we would need to start with the current February 2023 regs.
Right. Let me look into that. Because we were on a call with them a couple weeks ago, and they said, well, everything's in our shared file that we have. And so let me check to see what we have.
Okay.
No,
I mean, that would be our next step, but I think we will want to work with the February 2023s.
Well, yeah.
As the point of departure for that discussion. And then my suggestion there would be to at our public hearing, it would be useful to put together, I think, maybe as a staff practice, a recitation of all of the opportunities for public input we've had on the caps and bar, and that's all of those public meetings Stanley has put together, as well as the explicit public hearings. And I say that because I was a little disappointed in the participation in the February 2023 regulations that the county commission passed, that there had been no previous comments on those. Ideally, this would be the body that vets those, works out, changes around, but everybody waited until 3 days before the county commission met to submit the comments. So we could benefit from all those comments as we move into this, so maybe it might be useful, so put together a packet of comments that we received on that set of regulations before the county commission, as though they had been made. That's fair to the public. It's hard to get people to meetings, but I'd like to coax as much input out of the public participation.
And Chair Hinckley, if I may, some of those didn't come till 4 o'clock that afternoon.
Right.
So it's a little hard to get that out to the public or to you guys. There was one substantive amount of
Yeah.
comments that came in at 4 o'clock.
And we could just dismiss those, but I think that's fair. Let's roll those this next cycle. Everybody gets a second bite at the apple. Let's try to get people to pay attention. All right, that's all I was going to say by way of update. Stay tuned and be ready to get that one in our public hearing. You want to add anything to that?
No.
Okay. Then our item 4, or 7.5 would be the moratorium. Mr. Harris has prepared a resolution for our consideration, so let's let him introduce that.
Yes, also, largely the efforts of Ms. Curran in our office. Did everyone receive, sent out the resolution by email? This is really just to, suppose, serve as a, what it would look like once the commissioners actually accomplish it. It wouldn't be that this body is passing that moratorium or that resolution this evening. It would simply be giving a recommendation.
We have to give them recommendations.
That, yes, the case law is very clear that the recommendation for a moratorium first has to come from Planning and Zoning Commission. So it is the same as last time, just adding that, this has gone once through already, where on December 20th, the board approved resolution 2022-021, declaring the freeze on new subdivision permit applications and zoning district amendment applications within the APOZ. The board then held that hearing on January 17th. To consider, I suppose, the permanency of the resolution or the moratorium. The moratorium was made permanent for 120 days from that point, which would be April 19th, 2023. So I guess the only change with this one was that Jennifer Kern's recommendation that it was a 120-day moratorium before. Our recommendation would be to add another 2 months to that, which is based off of the progress of the cap. And I mean, we've all seen how long regulations take. So this is the cap, and then also getting the regulations. So we bumped that to 180 days. From the expiration of the Board of County Commissioners, or from the expiration of the Board of County Commissioners resolution on April 19th, or until such time that the cap update and subsequent regulation changes are complete, whichever occurs first.
Otherwise, it's the same resolution that was passed.
Yeah, with I suppose the history of the board and the expiration of their resolution.
Have you been approached by people who are wishing to do subdivisions in this area and you've had to tell them, sorry, there's a moratorium, or has it been quiet?
We haven't had any subdivisions, but
I've talked to a guy about zoning.
but they haven't brought any.
They haven't run.
Thanks.
And he was actually trying to upsell. Go to from rural residential to ag. So.
Others? Okay, my question is, do we need this? Given the action of the county commission at the end of February. For example, do we need a moratorium on new subdivision permit applications now that the current regulation is there will be no subdivisions with lot sizes less than 35 acres? So perhaps we have accomplished what this moratorium was anticipating.
That's certainly a policy determination for this board. It's just as part of our due diligence to bring it to your attention. Should you want it to continue, to give you that opportunity.
Mr. Chairman, I thought the whole point of the moratorium was to get the regs passed, which we did.
Well, a set of regs passed, but that's the substance of my question. So let's turn to Mr. Gersh. What is this moratorium protecting the county from at this point? If anything. Again, we would like to get rid of moratoriums as quickly as they no longer.
So yeah, the two things in them were no zoning changes and no zoning district amendments, and then no subdivisions. Like you said, the subdivision thing is kind of out the window with our current regs, because they don't allow anything less than 35 acres. The zoning change. No, I don't think. I mean, I guess if we don't want to have any zoning district amendments, that would protect from somebody coming in and asking for commercial property or something like that. Don't ask me my opinion on moratoriums because it's not very positive, so.
Your opinion.
I mean, this moratorium, when we put it into place, it was clear and it did what it was supposed to be, but that's not how it's been in the past. So I was okay with this. I'll just say that. But whether we need to continue it, that's really a matter of up to you guys.
Well, wait a minute.
I don't.
Who is presenting this moratorium then? Because we did present it.
That is.
So this.
Well,
this- you want to.
I'm
No.
letting you know that the moratorium will be expiring on April 19th, and should you.
I don't see one here saying we want a moratorium.
That is the question before us. Is that has brought to our attention that the current moratorium is expiring, and the question is, are we okay with that, or would we like to extend? Go ahead.
I guess the only future regulation changes that we would be contemplating that could be impactful would be broadening the list of prohibited activities, changing what the SSI is required and having the peer review aspect of that, and having that the setback from a vulnerable feature only made mention of wastewater structures. It didn't provide for setbacks in general of all development. So those are the main impactful changes that I can think of that you could either say, what are the chances of a CAFO coming in, in the next bit? So I'm only mentioning that as like what I've been thinking of is the meaningful reg changes that we have to make. But does that, for this short period of time, is that going to be a problem?
And that's the same exercise I was going through. I could think of what has changed. Something like SSIs, of course, the moratorium did not affect those. So this doesn't say.
No, it's just part of the subdivision process. So we've been wrapped in with subdividing that you need to do your SSI.
But we're not proposing to do SSIs for 35-acre subdivisions, are we?
No.
Right, so I guess it doesn't.
And Mr. Chair, along with the SSIs, I believe a zoning district amendment would require an SSI, which I think would take care of the zoning aspect of this, because I'm not sure what we would propose going forward that would be different. what we have. When it comes to zoning district amendments and subdivisions themselves. So, I don't know, as we're talking through this, I'm not seeing a huge, whether this is super useful right now.
So that, I just wanted us to talk through that and go through the same exercise that you just did of what could happen that we would find problematic that this would address. Not to say there aren't problematic things out there, the western boundary, for example, but this doesn't address the western boundary.
It's not.
So the things that we're contemplating improving in the regulations. The point about prohibited uses, there was that limitation of prohibited use that someone could come in and apply for that under the current regs. It's quite small.
Well, and Mr. Chair, going through the plan process, right? And so we won't even get to the regulations until that concludes. And so you're looking at quite a bit of time that if we want to keep this in place, it's going to be in place for quite a while. I mean, I think it goes out 180 days. Is that October 16th? Which it would be great to see if the regulations are done by then, but knowing how things work and yeah, that's pushing it. And do we want to keep doing this? And is there a purpose? Or is it just we're doing it?
Okay, well, the original purpose was
fulfilled.
was quite clear,
Yeah.
and it's been useful. But yeah, I'm sympathetic to letting moratoriums expire once their utility has expired. And so from the legal point of view, this is what we would need to do if we wanted to go forward. You guys are not bringing it forward as a recommendation. Is that correct?
No, I mean, it's,
It might be just a general.
if you had wanted to do it, this would be the time to do it. So we wanted to have that prepared.
So thank you for that.
Well, we talked about this.
Okay. Yeah, if there is no sympathy for continuing the moratorium, no action is necessary, correct?
Yes.
Okay, going once.
I have no problem with that.
I'm feeling better about it as we sit here.
I wanted to have the discussion because my first reactions, yeah, it did what it's supposed to do and let us not have moratoriums. There's just this general, maybe we'll just wait until we get everything all done, we might think of something, but that doesn't seem like a very strong reason.
Yeah, just fire because always must fire.
Well, exactly right. Okay, well, then I'm prepared to move on to the next item on the agenda. Right. We just saved you guys some effort, so you owe us.
Not.
All right, thank you. I would ask for public comment, but, well, we do have that in public. And we do have that, yeah, no, I mean, public comment on that particular one. All right, growth area management plan, next item. I guess to just a status update, Mr. Rich.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, we obviously have our meeting on May 10th, where we'll consider the growth area management plan and consider comments that come at that time. I can report on the city's discussion. I think they took about an hour and a half to discuss it on Monday. It was they did an overview. Melissa from Logan Simpson was there to answer questions. The only really substantive question that came up and concern had to do with water, or not water, the utility extensions and the cost of that and the cost for development, so the fiscal type things that came from one of the planning commission members. And I think Melissa and city staff just answered it, and this is a general map, this is not, we don't know exactly how this is all gonna play out.
Is that from Jake Schneider or?
No.
No. Okay.
Jake wasn't there actually, so. But yeah, they had a pretty good discussion. It was, it passed 3-2, which was interesting, so. And one of the folks, you know, gave it their dissent or explained their dissent. The other person was on Zoom and she didn't, all she said was no, there was no discussion. So I guess city staff were left wondering what her issues were with it as well, so. Yeah, that's kind of where it left, or it was left there, so they passed it pretty much as is. And so there's nothing on our end that we would have to change, to be consistent or to have a similar plan. And then, yeah, so now if we make changes, then they would reconsider it. At planning commission before they take it to the city council, so that'd be kind of the process going forward. So we'll see what happens on the 10th, and then if we're okay with it. And you know, the document that we received and we published, it was missing some pictures. There were some places in there. Those have since been updated, which I'll get you the updated plan with those, which are not substantive changes. So. I don't think so. Pictures.
Pictures.
Yeah, pictures of people at a public meeting.
Yeah, they were missing.
So they're in there. Yeah. So, and I think everything else is pretty much cleaned up, but yeah. So that's where we're at. That's where we're going. If you have any questions?
I have a lot of questions.
Okay.
In fact,
Joe, get up here.
to me, unless I don't understand the purpose of the growth plan, I did not understand why the only two topics were water and sewer, and the costs associated with them. I thought that if you're doing a growth plan, you should address a lot more issues than just water and sewer. And I have a whole list here. I can go through it, or I can send it to you guys via email, whichever way works better. One was the costs, and I would have liked to be on that meeting where the costs were explained. For example, there was nothing in the plan mentioning any changes to the tax of the parent residents within the growth area, and whether the annexation is full or only, what does it mean? The annexation, what does it mean in terms of what do people in the zone need to do? How is their status going to change? The sources of revenue. I have a problem with a 7-cent tax. Every sales or property tax usually affect low-income people, and they're very regressive. And so I think that is a very bad model, especially since the new coming people, that the growth is probably not going to be a whole lot of low-income people. It's going to be a lot of high-end people coming into Albany County. Hopefully not too many climate refugees from Colorado or Texas, but I envision that we're going to have a state residential more than trailer parks. And so we are going to have the low-income residents of Albany County subsidizing the cost of development. I strongly opposed to that. I also did not understand from the financial analysis how a storm drain utility is going to raise money. That's my probably misunderstanding of what is going on, although I am very keen on storm drains because my raccoons use them all the time, both for denning and for travel. And so that was cost was one. I have several items underneath that. Just like Chair Hinckley mentioned when he voted against making the plan public, I did not see anyone address the issue of water availability. We talked about where to put the lines and how much the lines will cost and how we're gonna deal with the septic system and all this stuff. But there's no talk about water availability. And to me, and we'll talk about this, I hopefully will come up with my private discussions with Chair Hinckley, is that basically we're going into extreme climate change situations. And unfortunately, the recharge zone of the Casper Aquifer is getting less and less precipitation. So our recharge is going to be lower. Correct me if I'm wrong. But all the climate projections I've seen, we're going to be dealing with a water availability issue that we need to put into the plan. How are we going to deal with this? There's also a mismatch between where we're going to put water line and sewer line. I don't understand why. When you look at the maps, they're not identical. So I would like more information on that. The landfill. There was no discussion of waste disposal services, how our current system is going to handle the growth. I thought that was really, really cool performance of whoever developed the plan, given how much money we put into the landfill recently. There's also no mention of schools. And don't get me wrong, I know that the school district is in charge of that, but I think the plan should have included them as a partner. Travel on the roads, location of new schools. Do we need new schools? What is the population of young people moving in? All that was not mentioned in the plan. Recreation was mentioned, but it wasn't detailed. I have a lot of items on that needs to be included in the plan, if it is going to be a plan. Roads. There was some discussion of traffic in the financial analysis, but there is no mention of the current situation and what will happen to existing roads. Are they platted, unplatted? Who is going to maintain them? How much is going to go into maintenance, etc. Power lines, power generation, climate adaptation. None of it was mentioned. Plan, I think that's a big mistake. The plan is what we call in science deterministic. They took average, they did everything by average, which, by the way, shocked me to know that only 0.45% of the Laramie population is actually employed as jobs. I was shocked, but anyway, I didn't see any scenarios of who is going to contribute to the growth. Is it families with kids? Is it retirees? What is going to happen to revenue to the city, and therefore what burden will fall on the county if the state passes the property tax cap proposal? Didn't go through this time, but it's going to go through probably in 2024. That seniors and retirees have the cap on property tax. One of the main income sources for the city of Laramie is property tax. This is nobody modeled that I could see. And finally, so there was a lot of things that need to go into the plan before I can even comment on it, is governance. If this is going to be a full annexation, how are we going to change city wards? Are we going to increase at a ward? Are we going to change the boundary of the wards? How are we going to make sure that people have equal representation? What about our House district and our Senate? I'll be happy to send this to you via email if you're interested. Anyway, I need more information. I think that requesting public comments without a more comprehensive plan is going to backfire on us. A lot of people are upset with the word annexation. There is no understanding of the big picture, which I totally support. I think we need to have this plan, absolutely. But without people seeing how that is going to affect them and how it's going to benefit them, it's going to be a big damage. My 2 cents on that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So, thank you, for all those comments. Please send them my way. And I'll send them on to our consultant so they can look at them and we will have the consultant here at our meeting on the 10th. So she'll be here to answer any questions as well. Just to do brief over all of them. I would say that, this plan is specific to one reason. It's looking specifically at the growth of the city into the county in those areas that are around the city limits. It's to guide growth, to guide developers and how they grow. It's looking specifically at utilities, roads, those types of things. Some of the other things you mentioned, like recreation and some of those things, there are other plans that address those, especially in the city, maybe not in the county. But the purpose of this is for the city to grow in a logical way into the county, where annexation occurs, roads are extended, water and sewer are extended. So a lot of those things weren't addressed. I mean, and that's something that we can ask for, obviously. That's your prerogative. However, I don't think that was even in the scope that was given to the folks Logan Simpson to do. It was basically to like, how can we grow into the city, develop an MOU or something between the city and the county to make sure it grows. So the county development's not blocking city development, and then come up with some regulations to make sure that happens as well. So, and there's been, I don't know if you were here for some of the discussions on the intergovernmental agreement, but there's been discussion in this group of whether we want to do that, whether it's a good idea, but that was in the scope of work for the Logan Simpson team. So, and that doesn't really answer your questions, but that's what's happening.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about pictures and let them all. I think there is a lot of it's not a comprehensive plan.
It's not.
Given that we have similarly just been through a similar exercise with the university that has totally blown up on us, which with reorganization. Walk in, have a great idea. It's a great idea to take the sciences out of arts and sciences and move them to ag for political reasons, funding reasons, whatever you do it. But if you don't have a comprehensive plan and you just go out and you announce it to the world, this is what we're going to do without knowing what the details are and what the hiccups can be, and then you get stuck with the details. And that's where we're at right now with the university. I don't want us to go through this. This is an important plan. This is an important plan. It needs to be comprehensive. You need to do sensitivity analysis. What if everybody that is responsible to the growth from 20 to 2040 are retirees and the state caps? I mean, look, as a county, we probably are not too badly affected by this because we are not expected to pay for anything. But we're all county residents, as Chair Hinckley likes to say, and the cost ends up on us anyway. So I think that if you are going to do this and you're calling it an annexation, it better be a comprehensive plan. You don't want to be in the position that the university administration is right now, because they have to backtrack on everything.
And we do have a comprehensive plan already. This one's just more of a plan to define our relationship with the city. The city and the county are defining their relationship and how development occurs. but it is not comprehensive and it is not a comprehensive plan.
Yeah, and it's. Yeah.
And I understand where you're coming from. Yeah, absolutely. So.
I mean, I haven't, I've seen it shared, emails, oh, look at this plan, but I can tell you from knocking on many people's door in the county that there will be a backlash. And we should avoid it. Why go through this? Why not do the right?
So, I wonder if it would be useful to share the RFP as a consultant. I'm always sensitive to matching scopes, and budgets and timelines. And
We could provide that in your packet.
I
That's not a
think
problem.
that maybe that would be informative of this discussion. We all think of a million things that should be studied, but in fairness to this consultant, that I'm not a great fan of the plan, as you pointed out. What were they asked to do? Perhaps they were asked the wrong things, or they were not asked as many things as they could have been, should have been. But I guess I would offer that we do have to play within the four corners of this project.
My complaint about the consultants would be different than what I present.
Well, so perhaps your complaints are with those who wrote the RFP.
Yes, it's not a complaint. I just say that I think creating a comprehensive plan for the county is absolutely a priority, has to be done. That utilities is one of the issues that needs to be addressed, but it's not the only issue that needs to be addressed, because if you only deal with water and sewage and you don't think about school and you don't think about income and you don't think about taxes and you don't think about what will fuel this, you're gonna get stuck with regulation that we come up with that nobody can implement. That's not how you do a plan.
So, to move forward, we did put something out for 30-day public review, and we expect a lot of comments, and we are not committed to embracing that at the end of that time period. So I guess that's what you're saying. Let us see what transpires between now and that meeting, and at that meeting, then we will be faced with specific votes, whether they're certified in its then form or amended, or seek additional funding to expand its scope. I guess there are many options that may be available. But fair.
Well, again, this particular phase of the overall plan was meant to be very general, conceptual from the outset. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, all plans
This
in
was sort of
general.
foundational,
Yeah,
leading to more concrete steps down the road, right?
the zoning and the potential intergovernmental agreement, yes.
And many of the things, this sort of thing would be conducted and carried out by the city as they grow. Is that not correct? I mean, there could be planning utilities and as they annex properties and.
Right, and they may have standards for a lot of those, like they do have a Parks and Rec master plan that'll apply once the. City's annexed into the properties annexed into the city. I'm not sure what they do with schools and how that is,
The
but
state, I think that you have to work out. The funding calculation is based on your student population, and then you go to the state. And you're saying, hey, we need another building. Hey, we need to enlarge this building. So I think the school district is. Just talks to the state about what they do based on a per pupil dollar amount. And they get in line. For money.
sure.
Yeah, but where the school building will go, what property is gonna be assigned to it.
Right.
It's a collaborative process with a lot of different agencies, and I don't think all of them are included in this plan. Planning for.
And much of that is within the city and their planning opportunities. As I have approached city and county planning staff, inviting steers to give us the speech, which is the It's just a plan. It just guides things. All of these myriad details will be sorted out. That sounds to me like someone kicking the can down the road. In fairness, like the cap, there will be derivative from this, a host of specific zoning decisions that will come to us, and the heavy lifting on the city. So it is.
Yeah, but that's
it is a
running our responsibility to our constituents.
Well, yeah, who are our constituents in this case? As you point out, there are the citizens of Laramie City as well as those outside the city,
And I'm
but they're
very,
well attended by a separate planning staff, a series of planning documents.
I mean, I'm concerned about my friends and colleagues who live in the city, because the burden, and especially the low income people, the burden of bottom.
Well, yeah.
I mean, if they use the 7.
Right, and I don't know the exact wording, the verbiage in there, but I think they were just, these are your options, right?
Yeah.
In the 7th penny, that would take a vote by the people of Albany County to determine whether that went through anyways. And, yeah, I don't think anybody's proposing to do that with this, but that's an option, obviously, you know, so. And I think you just have to list all of your options, you know, in these plans. These are your opportunities. And not, I don't know if there's a promotion of that. I guess I don't remember this specific verbiage, but yeah. So,
It was just one of the 3 options.
sure. Yeah, and that's the hard part, you know, a lot of this, most of this, what this plan will do. Once regulations are implemented, if there's an IGA that's implemented, is it means when somebody comes to develop in this area, there are some standards they have to meet, and if they can't meet it, they can't develop. I mean, if they are close enough to the city, then they have an option of potentially annexing it and getting the services and then developing to city standards. You know, that's kind of what this is looking at and making sure we're reserving right of ways in places for infrastructure and those types of things where there's nothing in place at the county level right now to, well, we do major street plan. The major street plan is one way that we make sure that connections can be made through roads and those types of things, and we can at least reserve easements and those types of things. But when it comes to, you know, utilities and that kind of stuff, there's not a whole lot, you know. We don't deal with utilities. We deal with wastewater or septic and wells. We don't even deal with that. Someone else does. That's the property owners' problems. We just make sure they do it right. Yeah, so there are lots of good discussion points. I appreciate that. You send that information on, and maybe we can get some more information from our consulting team, and I'll look over it too. What's to say? Have it passed on. So, but
Send it only to you or?
yeah, just to me, it's secret. No, not just secret. No, if you give it to me, I can send it out to everybody else if you like. Yeah, it'd just be easier to do that.
And it would also be more appropriate in the sense of our collective discussions. Should be conducted at these meetings.
Yeah.
As this just was, but
Yeah.
there's going to be some serious discussion. Try to channel those towards public exposure. And it sounds to me that it may be useful for you to just sit down together and talk about what this plan can do. And then some of this, to me, sound like long-range planning for ourselves to do something more comprehensive. And it's something that Commissioner Platter has brought up repeatedly. Why is this growth there? Imagine the plan stopping at this particular boundary, and many of the issues they fade out. So I think there's a additional planning that we should be doing at the county level, quite beyond this.
Right. I mean, our comprehensive plan was created in 2008, and a lot has changed. So
Yeah.
I mean, it needs to be updated, definitely. So if anybody's got some money, we'll take a pool.
I am a big fan of the ILA. the Inflation Reduction Act has a lot of money for Wyoming that we as a county need to jump on before the 2024 election, and maybe who knows what will change that, right?
Sure.
I mean, there is, I can send you the plan for Wyoming.
Cool, yeah.
A
love to see
lot of,
that. Yeah.
a lot of funding opportunities that we as a community need to jump on. I think, Commissioner Bosa is looking at some of this, but we definitely need to, why not,
Right,
right? If the money is there and they want to give it to Wyoming, let's take it.
yeah,
As the county grants officer looked at comprehensive plan, its eligibility for funding. So it might be worth a question.
yeah.
But
Has there been any further work with IGA?
No, once the plan is approved or not approved, and I guess it's not approved, then there won't be an IGA at all to look at, but if it does get approved, then that's kind of the next step is to look at the zoning and the IGA piece. And determine how we go forward with that, and yeah, so. We've got a skeleton of those, you know. If we need drastic changes in the plan, a skeleton will change a little bit.
we're quite a long way from being done with this topic, but the plan is the base. Should be done.
Okay,
Correct.
May, June.
Yeah, you realize that 6 months is gonna get us across the finish line on that.
No. One thing I've learned since being in planning, I moved here and I had worked for a nonprofit, and you know, we got money, we just project, got her done, and you know, it was like just went like that, and now working as in the planning field and government, and I realized that you don't just do that, you just be patient and you work through the process and you make sure you make it right, and you get public opinion, and it takes some time, and that's okay, so.
Further discussion of this item, it sounds like our May 10th meeting may be full, and public comment should not simply be counting down the clock. And if folks that any of us are talking to want to weigh in on this, should be the forum. And in many ways, it's a more appropriate forum than the county commission. You're the
Absolutely.
vetting agents.
Well, a final question, hey, are you, would you be satisfied with the effort the city is making, and your collaboration with them?
Yeah.
Good.
All together.
Okay, ready to move on? The Urban Systems Advisory Committee, which many of us didn't even know, but you, Zach, meant. We discussed at our last meeting, and Commissioner Platt had volunteered for that, but not immediately. Mr. Hang represented us at the last meeting, which was eventful. And I think, yeah. My understanding of it was that they got the comment they had never had before. But maybe you'd like to give us a report on which we decided to do.
It was interesting, because it sounds like these meetings are usually rather brief. And there is not a lot of discussion like we have in here, like I would say it's pretty quiet. And so, there were only, trying to think, there were only 2 changes made to the major street plan. And one, I made a motion to get rid of 45th Street from like above the golf course down to Grand Avenue, essentially, because it crosses over the aquifer. And it's not consistent with everything we've been working on with the CAP to have a road go through there. So I made a motion and was surprised it got seconded. And then I was even more surprised that it passed. I don't think that it made the city very happy, because I'm sure they are counting on that to move the population of people around like you're talking about. But I guess I think of it as if there was a standing body of water there, you'd have to find a way to move the traffic around it. And we should be treating the aquifer as though it's a standing body of water. And I think there's probably other ways to solve traffic problems. If people think creatively, but the city was definitely not happy with the motion passing is my guess.
Just so I understand, it was gonna go through the schoolyard?
Yeah, it would have gone, it would have, you know.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
Sort of
Yeah,
skirting
right.
the schoolyard, I believe. It would have been immediately west of the schoolyard, across the gully, at least to start out with. It would have intersected trails at some point because it was projected to go between Story Range Academy and all the things across the street.
So it didn't seem consistent with the recreational plans or aquifer protection. But I think the city has been resistant to removing that for a long time because they're, occasionally they have to be worried that 15th Street is going to get cut off by the legislature. And they're probably worried about all these major roads being eliminated. So I don't think that they were for that change, but enough other people were for the change. And 2 people were absent, could have all come out different if those 2 people had been there. But for now, it's not a, but like David said, you can have the long view. And in a future meeting, someone can just like put that back in and have enough. So, so it's a short term win in my view that could easily resolve in the future with a different makeup of.
That's why informing the public is on these decisions is super important because the outcry from people who use, the schoolyard would have been more than any city council could have withstood. So
The only other change to the major street plan was to extend Inca Drive further north, which makes sense with the residential. So, but the future for the next meeting would be to look more specifically at the major street plan relative to the growth area management plan. So if you're still psyched about being the person on USAC.
I can't remember what I said, I'm being psyched, but I'm willing to do it. Actually, just I would think that I thought the city were abandoned that section of 45th Street.
No, well, so that was the first thing that happened. There's a list of priority projects to be worked on and that it was taken off as being a priority. Mostly because I think the city just felt like it's so far out in the future. Sure, take it off of the list. If we need to do it later, we'll put it on the list. So it is the long view that planners have. It's like, let it go away for now. If people don't want it, we can always add it back in later if there's pressure to meet that. And so that was the first thing that got done, and then I made the motion to actually get it physically taken off the major street plan. And was surprised that it passed. So, yeah, at the next meeting, there could be pressure to be like, hey, if we're growing in these areas, we really needed this in our street plan.
I'll check, but I'm almost positive the city already decided that an incorporation of these recreation areas that they had nixed.
Well, they, who's they and what that decision, this major city road plan, if you look on the city planning site prior to this meeting, includes that road.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I know 45th going north, where right now the development's going on, had been split. There was a median strip in between as part of planning for a major road into north and south. And that no longer the developer who's developing this last street up there, I can't remember the name, isn't required to continue that median because they've abandoned idea of having 45th go all the way to Grand Avenue. Could be wrong, I'm gonna check on that.
I can just tell you in the meeting packet, the city recommended not abandoning 45th Street from the major street plan. Because I think they just see it as a way to alleviate traffic pressure. Even if you have to cut off a little bit or dissect a little bit of recreation land. That it would relieve some of the future traffic pressure. So they recommend it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what happened at the last meeting, but I guess the decision for us is whether to replace Commissioner Henning with Commissioner Platt as our designated representative on this committee. Is that you want to do that?
Oh, no, I'm willing to do it.
Yeah, I move to nominate Commissioner Platt for the reset.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Is there further discussion of that motion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Same sign. It's unanimous. Thank you for carrying our concerns forward into this committee. And if you want any background on any of this, there was this, on this particular issue, there was a small background packet of information that I put together for them. That I'd be happy to share with you.
Very good, that'd be great.
Okay.
Somebody needs to ask the city to create a roundabout on right here. When you come from the highway and you want to turn to Fort Collins or turn to here. You can stand in that intersection for hours. Not hours, I'm exaggerating, minutes. They talked about that, minutes. They talked about it there. When you come off the highway, I-80, and then you try going south on 37.
Oh, okay, yeah, that was great, yeah.
That
Right.
No, they talked about that with the city, when I first was on city planning, that was one of the road changes, and they put up pictures of what it would look like signage wise to deal with a roundabout there, and it looked very, and what they would have to do within some right of ways, and this, you could tell the city didn't think it was gonna be the right solution, but.
And then a light would be awful. That would be accidents waiting to happen.
We're not doing travel. Okay.
Why not just want to pay for anything?
Just to remind ourselves, we are, April is the month of meetings. This one on the 19th, we will have training. If anybody has any ideas on that they want to get into the play as our staff are preparing for that, send those in.
Where is that meeting?
That will be on the 19th
Yes.
at county planning office, correct?
Yeah, we'll just have it in the conference room there, so.
And where
And
is that on Third?
3rd Street, yeah. Do you know where what is it now? It used to be
Walk up
Ann's
the
Pawn Shop across the street from Ann's Pawn Shop. What's it? It's like a financial place. that we
Okay.
use.
Drive south, 1,000 south, the first light,
Yeah.
and it's one block up from that.
It's kind of weird. It's kind of a weird looking building, like roofs like this, it's 2-story deal, so.
Just what's part of our ugliest building.
Yeah. Did you want to say something about that?
yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Will all the members, are you planning to attend in person for that?
I did trained up on a variety of issues, so.
The last one did go for.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I'm with your questions, so. Ashton.
I'll make Matt.
Put them on the 2 times.
Check it.
I mean, the most senior person of this group is me with at what, 2 years and small change, so it's appropriate that we remind ourselves how we got here.
Oh, they don't mind.
Okay, anything else on that? Then we'll have our public hearing on the 26th. And then our next regular meeting on the 10th. And that will also be public hearing on both time as well as the normal first events. Questions on our schedule, comments on any item of interest?
Do we also have the hearing on the practice and procedures?
May 10th.
May 10th, okay.
Oh, yeah, that's, it's right now, let's put out for review as well.
That lines up with the 10th grade. So it's gonna be cap all over.
So, yeah, with luck, the cap will be off on somebody else's plate, although the regulations intended for that are insubstantial. Okay, anything else we want to bring up? We do have a final agenda item for citizen comments. We've whittled our citizens down to Ms. Bath. Would you like to address us on some topic of interest? Going once, going twice. What are those left-hand screens? Is there somebody out there? Where? What's the? Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, there's nothing, it's.
IT, us, and.
Okay, all right. Well, if Bonnie has nothing to say, then going once, going twice, absent objection, we are adjourned. Thank you for your patience. Look forward to seeing you all on 19th.
David, tell the truth. 2 years ago, did y'all ever have any special meetings?
You know, when we updated the zoning regulations, we did it a few times, not as many as now. This is probably more.
We've been a moratorium on
What we're doing is long-term stuff. Ideally, we would get back all these plans.
I was
Decisions.
absolutely not complaining about that.
No, but I think there's gonna be a payoff. In years to come.
Amazing to me, how many years have passed from, 97, 2015, and nothing, that's ridiculous.
It was a different era.
All you people just think, well, everybody wants it.
But it helps to take a geologic perspective, years here and there. But,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you'll know better than any of
I
us.
thought it was gonna be shorter.
One different commissioner, totally different again.
Yeah.
I know what you mentioned, balance is quite clear, the bolts on their manual plan.
And that's, I think that's. Crazy.
Okay, so Rob. What's, I'm hoping the next couple of days if you want.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not. And my parents. So I get to explain how it's going to everyone. No, I like my name.
I know how that.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Okay.
But I like it. Because I live in Old.
Crystal Benjamin.
Yes. That's, yeah, my first thought.
What's your first name?
You guys see you next week.
There was like a few slides. In fact, I always sign my name.
All I have is the, I mean, I can hold it in, but
I did part of it. And I'm graduating. Bureaucrat would not allow me to test my. I had to do it. It's coming out.
Just to figure out.
Yeah, so big, every mile.
I mean, it doesn't have to be, I'm just thinking if you wanted to just strike while the iron is semi-hot and,
I do.
we could get together tomorrow.
Not this. No,
And I guess.
Well, in that case, right there, with the